I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's 8:30. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is a time for an invitation for a citizen to schedule a time on the commission agenda for an item not listed. Do we have anyone that wanted to add anything to the agenda? The record should show that we do not. Next is approval of the agenda. And at this time, I'm going to remove item number J under regular business. Are there any other changes or additions or corrections to the agenda? Would we have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
On the consent agenda, we have approval of minutes, approval of travel and education requests, approval of personnel action notices, and approval of the human services report.
Second.
Does anybody have anything they'd like to add or remove from the consent agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Approval of claims.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion on the claims? We'll have a roll call vote on claims.
Jensen,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Krogman,
Aye.
Pierce,
Aye.
motion carries.
Department head reports. Shall we start with you, Dick?
Good morning. I'm hoping Stacy had a minute to hand out my department head report. I kind of got late yesterday with that. But on the 17th, that was the last commission meeting. And in the afternoon, I attended a meeting with Stephanie and Larry over in Volga, and then also had to coordinate things with Sioux Equipment and our electrician as far as our installation. That was done yesterday. So our new fuel dispenser that was from last year is now installed and operating. I talked to Jameson on the 18th with the city of Volga, and it was just going over some of the stuff with Samara Avenue as far as what I told him I'd get back to him on what the commissioners thought of a possible dollar amount or materials amount or anything that the county might want to contribute to their project in lieu of them taking over the road. And I just told him that I said when we get a little firmer idea as to what we would like to contribute, if anything, I'll get back to him. On the 19th, I talked with Colin at Banner to get some ideas of what it might cost Windsor Township for those box culverts that Josh Spieldy was here on the 17th requesting assistance with. Colin is not able to give an exact quote without obviously knowing what work would be involved, but he didn't think it would exceed any more than what our normal box culverts would be, and usually that's in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $7,000, but they always put will not exceed $10,000 in case something comes about. So I will wait until I visit with Josh again and see exactly what they want and exactly what the county might be asked to contribute, and I'll follow up with that at a later date. Then on the April 20th, I attended a meeting on big grants at the City County building with Stacy, Vicky, Jen, Linda, and Stephanie to talk over some things on the big grants, and I believe Stacy will give a more detailed report, so I won't trouble you or bother you with that now. April 22nd, I went to the NAES conference in Wisconsin, which was extremely informative. Had a lot of nice sessions that were very pertinent to things we do here. One that was a little bit more involved but very interesting was on life cycle costing for bridges. And so I'll probably visit with Banner on some of those ideas and see what they think of the information I brought back. On April 23rd, the highway crew switched to summer hours. April 30th, talked to Tyler Smith with BMW and their project that's going on right north of our shop where they're going to put the big substation pad. That will be moving ahead very, very quickly, and the contractors will be in touch with us as they begin to do work. And then I also yesterday visited with Jeff Anderson, the foreman, with information I brought back from the NACE conference, updated the status for big grant projects and plans that you were asking about the last meeting on the 17th. The plans are still out for review at the state level. However, they had heard that they were still hoping that they would have a bid letting in October or November of 2018. And that bid letting will be just for the 2 bridges or structures that are on Highway 77 south of Brookings. The 3rd structure that on the Sinai Road will be designed, and that bridge should be almost, I guess, advanced to the point of bid letting after, well, it'll probably be later this fall, if not early next year. But either way, they're all moving ahead, is probably not as quickly as we would like, but they're certainly moving forward.
Richard, so if we bid let that, so we're looking at then construction in 19 then?
Correct.
So we will within a year, and then will we usually put a date by that, like September 1st or November 1st, hopefully prior to harvest season and that kind of stuff of 19? Is that what we're looking at, probably timeline?
If I'd have to find out for sure, I would assume that's absolutely correct. The other thing I think they would try to do would be like they did north of Bruce. They would allow them to start right away in like November or December, have it all tore out and hopefully constructed, so it'd definitely be done by, August 1st or something like that. Okay. That's our plan, but I'll certainly relay that to them, that we definitely want them, to consider that, because it'll be very fast moving, I would assume, when they're so close together.
Right. And again, I guess I just want to, maybe have some type of an idea of where the routes are going to be for the detour routes of all of them and stuff too, because especially if they're both being constructed at a similar time, now you're taking a couple different routes, and if, we try to get that out as much to the public as possible, the routes that they should be taking and trying to take for that amount of time.
Okay.
So.
Are you talking about October, November of 2018 that they might take the bridge out?
That's when they'll open bids. They're hoping to have a bid
Right.
letting. Well, what they did on the bridges north of Bruce is they had the bid letting in like October, and that guy started by November 1st. So what they'll do is, like Ryan was touching base on, the state DOT will give them a window of time to complete the whole project.
Yes.
But sometimes we might have a concern that over the winter, we don't want that road completely closed.
Exactly. That's the concern that I've got, because there are a lot of people that live out there that come back and forth for work. And if we're going to have 4 months in there where you can't do any work on the bridge, I don't think we would want to have the bridge removed. So it'd be nice if we kept all that in mind when we're planning our schedule.
Yeah.
Can certainly share that with them. Then our agreement for the striping contract finally came through. We'll do that at the next meeting from the state. Then the railroad crossing, I just got word this morning, west of Olga on Highway 14 will be replaced this summer. They are asking if they can use our Highway 1 and our Highway 6, which is right south of Oakwood State Park, and then Highway 5 coming into the west end of Volga. It will only be closed for 2 days and 3 at the max, but usually the railroad will move extremely quickly with that. And I guess I don't see a problem with it. However, adequate notice and everything, and the signage will be there, but let Matt Bry know that with the DOT that we'll expect some advance notice of that happening. Load limits will come off next Monday, May 7th, 2018. And the last thing, I guess, was a question of mine. Do you know when we might have that work session thing that you listed the agenda for? I don't know. There was some document down below. It said work session agenda. And then when you pull up the document, it says April 17th, 2018.
Oh, that's the work plan. That'll be discussed later in the meeting.
Okay, then I won't. That's fine.
Dick.
But that's all I have unless you have a question.
Dick, you anticipate the bridge deck on 16, they're still going to start on that in June here?
Yep. If we, I just got to find out a more finite date, but plan on the 3rd week in June.
Okay, that'd be good.
Okay.
Dick, when those 3 bridges are being worked on, and it sounds like pretty much all at the same time, do you plan the alternate routes, or is that something that somebody else does? How does that happen?
That is kind of determined by, there isn't much flexibility because like in the grant process, we have to decide what that detour route will be. And that's how they determine part of the impact on traffic for points. And it has to be a comparable road. If it was asphalt like it is on 77 South, they can only detour traffic on oil roads or asphalt roads. Now, what I would suggest is that as we get closer, we definitely know local traffic will follow a more localized and closer path like they did before, and we'll just have to address those issues, either dust complaints or more gravel on a road that isn't capable of handling, the additional traffic. But to answer your question, it is determined by criteria that the state sets. So,
And who does the determining? Do you do that, or does somebody else do that?
we would concur or disagree with what the state would,
So the state comes up with the alternate routes?
Yes.
Okay.
and like this agreement I was just talking about where they're going to redo the railroad crossing on Highway 14, they are telling me what the route is. Do I agree or see any problems? And then I comment back to them. So, I think we would definitely have some concerns if they chose roads that we knew we didn't want them on, and other roads, like if they send them 18 miles around and people decide to go closer, it's being a good neighbor for us to help out some of those other closer items. So,
And I think I'm joining in what Commissioner Krogman said. I think it'd be nice, it would be helpful for our citizens if we knew those alternate routes sooner rather than later, so that we can look at it and people can be planning how they're going to handle that. So when that information is available, it'd be nice to see it.
right, that's what we put in our grant application. I could
Are the
tell you,
alternate routes in the grant application?
yes,
So we could see those now?
sure, you bet. You just gotta,
But those may or may not be approved by the DOT, right?
well, if they're approved in the part of the grant, they would accept
Then they
that.
would, be okay.
Yeah,
And see, I guess my thought is, if there's issues with a smaller structure on one of the routes, that we could look at that sooner than later to rectify that if we know that that's going to receive a lot of traffic, or we're limiting the people that can go to that route. You know, for example, there might be a small bridge right next, I call it the Country Club Road, that they can't get through. That'd be a great alternative possibly to get around, because it comes right short of the Sinai Road too. But if there's a bridge there that we have a weight limit on, that we could, you know, use one of those, you know, or put some money into it to take that weight limit off some way. That's why I kind of want to see it earlier now. So if there's some money in the budget we could put in, and we could do that work first part of the year next year before they closed or something like that.
That's what we're doing on 16. We're at an alternate route here. I mean, that's why we're moving forward as we are.
Correct, yep.
And that'll be a good east to west route once we get that completed. So
So I guess if you want to look at that route and say, okay, this would be better if we did this to this and came with a suggestion to us, in my opinion, I think it would ease some of the pain of closing down two major roads from the south into Brookings.
But in all likelihood, do you feel the bridge on the road going to Sinai is going to be under construction same time as the 217?
I don't think it will be.
No.
It won't be?
I would be willing to bet that they'll have the 2 on 77, and if the same contractor, if they get their stuff in a order that they can bid let it, the same contractor will probably be aggressively bidding on that third bridge, but I don't know if he would start immediately after. I think you're going to see that those 2 on 77 will be complete and done, and then the third one will fall into place, but not before the others are done, I would venture to guess.
Okay.
Do we have limits on any of the bridges on the Country Club Road?
There's one derated, but it isn't a lot, but it is significant. I mean, see, right now, if they start the south or northbound traffic will have to get off at the Nunda exit and go over to the interstate and north, and then the southbound traffic will do the same. They'll get off go east on 324, it's R24 till the interstate bridge, south to Nunda, and then over. The other thing you want to remember with impact on traffic, any of that distance going north and south is not counted towards an inconvenience because they were going that direction anyway. So our whole detour route was only a 4-mile inconvenience because they're just going 2 miles one way and 2 miles back. It's just kind of the way the state weighs these things to allow points. So we're a lot better to plan on other items to give us points than the detour.
I just worry about farm equipment. You know, you don't want to put that on the interstate and that kind of stuff. So
Exactly.
I mean, the tractor trailers, they can get out there and get on an interstate just fine, but the farm equipment's going to have to find another way around, and grain hauling and different stuff like that. So just, you know, something to think about, I guess. So just want to
Okay.
plan on.
Other than that, I don't have any. If you have any questions.
Any other questions? Thank you. Marty?
Morning.
Morning.
Don't have too bad in the in the jail. We have 26 inmates right now. It has been busy in the jail and in my office the last couple weeks. The 24/7 program still stays. Got 142 participants. 78 come in twice a day to blow. Got 17 on scram. 61 come in for UAs, so that keeps the staff busy. A lot of those come in twice a week, so the jail continues to stay busy. Also, between the sheriff's office and the police department right now, we're tracking mental health related calls, and in the month of April, we had 23 health related, and so far we've transported about 28 to, Bart's got a different figure, but shows here by our stats that we've transported 28 to Yankton since the first of the year. We dealt with 10 emergency committals that went to either Avera or Yankton the month of April. So that continues to be something that we need to continue to work on. We've had 101 health-related calls between the police department and the sheriff's office since January 1st that we've tracked. And we haven't got the stats from the state's attorney's office also has health-related people come in, and also university police, but we don't have those stats there yet.
When you're saying health-related, you mean
Mental
health
I'm
related.
sorry, mental
Okay.
health-related
Okay.
type calls, yeah.
Okay.
Because the state's attorney's office deals with families all the time too. It may not reach to the point that it's an emergency committal, but so we're trying to track that and see where we're at and so forth. Also, then the press release went out this morning on Thursday. The sheriff's office, along with Highway Patrol and city police, assisted stopping a vehicle on the interstate which had 10 pounds of marijuana, cocaine, LSD, and ecstasy. Two individuals out of Iowa, I believe, a 19-year-old and a 20-year-old. They were both arrested for that, but it was a good cooperation between all the agencies on that. And that probably was geared for this area. Probably for this area. Also, my detectives have been busy with, there have been 2 stolen vehicle, I think one in the county, one in the city, I believe. They made some interviews yesterday, and I think we'll be wrapping those cases up. We've had some copper thefts in the county. I relate the small amounts of copper, so I kind of relate that to maybe our methamphetamine, getting money for methamphetamine. I kind of blame a lot of stuff on drugs, but it ends up being that's usually what it ends up being. The other thing is that, and I put it's in your packet on the RSV program that we started in probably 2005 or so. And now they were taken over by the Volunteers of America, which now they've lost their funding. And and so the program's going to end for them at the end of May. And I've decided also to go ahead and end the program too. And it's not, actually the Volunteers of America, the only thing they really paid for was they contribute to some insurance for the volunteers. Otherwise, actually, the county picked up the tab. And I had just prior to them ending the program, I did it. Every year I have to do an in-kind, what is the county's in-kind contribution to the program? And our in-kind for last year, for a year, was $12,254. That includes the patrol, the car, the gas, insurance for the drivers, and insurance, liability insurance, and that doesn't include some repairs. One of the things, when the RSVP program started in 2005, we had less going on out there, but the exposure is getting higher, and I'm actually every day they go out, I worry that I'm going to make sure I'm going to get these volunteers back in. I mean, it's not a runaway out there when we're talking about crime, but we're dealing with more things during the day. And my guys are trained to carry Narcan. All the stuff that they could come across. What if you come across the vehicle out in the middle of the gravel road and you got 2 individuals in there and they're overdosing on opiate and they don't know what to do? The training and the exposure, and I think it's just to the point that it's probably best to probably end the program also. They did some good things for me, did some with cattle out calls and those types of things. I thought at first maybe I could use them to have more at the schools, but then they're not armed. So then I put these guys somewhere, and we want probably armed law enforcement in schools, not unarmed. They look like policemen. Nobody knows if they're a deputy sheriff or a volunteer. They don't always read so, I thought I was probably exposed them by being in the schools too, in uniform and so forth. So I decided that the program will end. The patrol car has 174,000 miles on it. Guess what? The air conditioner don't work, and they found that out yesterday when it's 82 degrees out. So it's just, I just think the exposure is getting high for the county, and I think it's just best to probably just end it since we don't have the national backing in it too. So if there's any questions about that, I'll try to answer them.
Marty, is your staff gonna be able to cover what they did?
Yeah.
Providing hours and stuff too?
Yeah, that's not an issue. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They would check vacation homes and those types of things, but that'll just be the deputies will pick that up again on their routine patrol. Then they'll, most of my vacation homes are in the wintertime. And last winter, I had them not come out after January, I think January to April 1st. It got to the point that it was, the weather and stuff that I actually didn't have them come out most of the winter. So the deputies picked that up. When they're on the routine patrol, the people that we tell, and even when we had the RSVPs, I could not guarantee that somebody would go by their vacation home every day. It was once or twice a week, and that's the same with the deputies. We'll go past once or twice a week. We always make sure that they have somebody else also watching the home, and so forth. So I actually, had them most of the winter park. So I didn't have to, just with the roads and things like that. And got to remember, these volunteers are in their 70s and 80s, and every year it's getting a little tougher. They have to go through vehicle training, and we give them basic first aid, and it's, if they're going to be out there and represent the county and be in uniform, I got to make sure that they're properly trained to handle a situation when they come across. And it's just, I think the exposure is just getting more for us.
Madam Chair, I would just like to say thank you to the RSVP volunteers. They did do a good service, because many times in my 8 years, I've heard you say, well, I can have my RSVPs do that.
Yep.
And so they did serve a very good purpose for us, and I really would like to thank them for their service. And I'm sad that this program is done, because I know those people enjoyed it. When they sat in here, I know that they enjoyed what they were doing, and I wish we could find a niche for them. But
yeah. There's posters to put out and those types of things. They took the posters out and those types of things. So that will be that'll be missed for those, because other than that, I can't think of any, unless you guys have some questions.
Thank you.
Yep.
Vicki?
Good morning. Well, we made it through another first half tax season, and I want to thank my staff. It was been super busy the last week. We collected over $3 million just in taxes yesterday, plus the motor V we did. So we've been busy, and it went well. And I'd also like to thank Steve. The quitclaim deeds on the tax surplus properties have been filed, and we've received all the money for that, and they will be apportioned out this next month now for April. It will go out now in May. And so we got to take the expenses out of what was received, and everything else will get apportioned out to the entities, the White City, Bruce City, the schools, the county, and the water district. So those will be apportioned out. And we did finally have the state come and look at the area in the sheriff's office in the entryway for the kiosks. They were here on Friday. We had somebody from BIT and two from the Department of Motor Vehicle. and they think that will work. We have to get the wiring and the internet in there. There's already a camera, so we are responsible for getting that in there, so it'll be our expense, but I don't think it's going to be too much. And hopefully within the next month, they will get the kiosk put in there. And after that's done, we will get some media on that to let them know where it's at. So if everything goes as planned, it should be happening, so.
Where exactly is it going to go?
It's on the east, inside the east entryway at the sheriff's office. So they'll come in that first set of doors, and that is open 24 hours. The second set is closed, so just in the entry. So, and there's enough room in there, and appreciate Marty's willingness to have that put there. So, thank you. And we received from the state for the juvenile detention cost sharing. That was Senate Bill 73 in 2015. We received $12,327.98, which is the cost for housing juveniles. And they take the 3-year average, and anything over that, we are allowed $200 per bed. But that was $150,000 across the whole state. And actually, what they had claims for was $431,000. So we get 34% of the cost over the 3-year average. So that is the $12,327. So at least we get some reimbursement. Last year we had $8,800. So we did get reimbursed a little more this year. And I think that is all that I have, unless anybody has any questions.
I just want to thank the sheriff for his willingness to have the kiosk over there. I think that's going to work out really well for our citizens, and once we get the word out that you can pick up your tags there 24/7, I think we'll get used.
Yeah, I think so too. Appreciate it.
Anything else? Misty?
Good morning.
Morning.
I just have a few things, just a couple things for you this morning. Mosquito misters got calibrated, so we're good for another year. We did that April 26th in Mitchell. Everything looks good. I did have a couple questions about mosquito spraying already, and there's individuals out in the county that didn't know we had mosquito spraying or offered it. So I think word of mouth, and I'll revamp what's on the website, and we'll put that out there again, just to get that out there so individuals out in the county know that we have that service. And then also too, the State Department of Ag got a hold of me last Friday, and they are going to have an ATV safety training course in Pierre, but they're looking at bringing it here if we can get 6 or 8 more people to attend that ATV safety training. It's up in the area, but I would like to take the 2 new ATV employees that I've hired and get them to that training. And that's May 16th, 10 to 10. It's up in the air. And then I had Mike and Mitch and Gary back yesterday, so we're starting our weed season, getting everything ready to go. So far, everything is good. Pray that it stays that way. Otherwise, I don't have anything else. Do you have any questions for me?
I think the ATV training is a great idea. They should all go through it.
Yep. And it's free to us, unless we have to drive out to Pierre. Then we'll have to take our own ATVs also, because the state does not have enough ATVs. And I think if it's a safety training for our department, they should be training on the ATVs we're riding anyway.
So by bringing it here, the requirement you said was to have 6 more. Is that 6 more counties involved, or?
Anybody that needs the ATV safety training.
So if you have 6 people? Oh,
6 to 8 people, he said.
okay.
It would make it worth his time.
Are they reaching out to neighboring counties and
Right.
I
government
believe he
entities?
is.
Okay.
He did ask if we could use our ATVs, and I asked Laura, and we can't. It's a liability, even if we were to have him sign a waiver. So,
Have you talked to the weed supervisors in the surrounding counties to see if
Yes.
they would be interested in sending their guys?
yes, there's a couple more I need to get a hold of, but otherwise, nobody has bid on it yet.
Okay.
How about the city? Does the city have?
No, I
people that
don't know. Maybe City Park and Rec.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
get a hold of them and
Yeah.
we'll go from there.
You might want to ask at the state parks too.
State Parks and City Park and Rec.
It would be nice to not have to travel, because you'll have to take a trailer with our ATVs
Well,
on
we'd
it.
have to take
Yeah.
a pickup and a trailer and
Yeah.
another pickup,
Yeah.
or even my personal vehicle that would haul, but still.
Yeah.
If we can get them to come here,
Yeah.
I think it'd make
That
more
would be
sense.
good.
So,
Okay.
thank you.
Good morning. Starting from the last commission meeting, we had Governor's Day at South Dakota State University. I attended that over lunch. Our Ag Subcommittee met on April the 19th. We were slowly but surely pecking away at that, and it's about ready to be sent up to the second review committee on that. April 20th, I took off and went to an event down in Augustana University. April 23rd, I met with Madera Township representatives on flooding issues out in Madera Township, and we made a semi-game plan. The next step for the county itself is for me to talk to Mr. Burke this afternoon, and Madera wants a little bit of, I explained to Madera we can't do the work for him, but we can figure out what the next steps may be, and I'll present it to him at the next meeting and try to keep it moving forward, because there's two things happening there. One, of course, is our county road that's got the river being diverted, and then the second thing is a township road, 217th Street, I believe, and a bunch of culverts down there that's probably undersized. So it's going to be up to the township to make a decision on which way to go, I think. But we'll get them some information, and we'll keep this board updated on what happens with the discussions. We had storm spotter training over at the East Fire Station on April 24th. Todd Heitkamp, who's the new director of the National Weather Service in Sioux Falls, gave the training. We had over 90 people. All three of myself and my other two employees all attended that. The next day, we had a joint jurisdiction meeting in this room. And that same day, our South Dakota Office of Emergency Management Regional Coordinator visited. And the same day, I sat there and updated our USDOT grant. And I submitted that paperwork that night and received confirmation that they received the documents. So we're at the halfway point in that particular grant, and we're still in good graces with the federal government. And now we got until September to finish the grant. And I did go, and I'll have to turn a late travel request in, but I did go over to Hanson County and we set a tentative date on the first of the two exercises that we're going to tabletop exercises. And initially that exercise was going to be done in Beetle County, but they've got a new emergency manager. And this kind of exercise, you don't just throw a brand new emergency manager into it. It has to be someone that knows what they're doing. So we shifted the exercise point, and I still have to contact the USDOT and get permission to modify our grant, but that I don't see that being a big problem. April 26 to 29, I went to Deadwood, and that finished up my 1-year duty as DAV State Commander. In appreciation to the county, I left my little coins on the commissioner's table at least, and I want to express my thanks to the county commission for their support during the year. It's a lot of work when you're doing it, but it's a whole lot better when it's done. April 28th, which was Saturday, there was a Civil Air Patrol event over at the Brookings Airport, and I sent Richard over there with our red county truck, and we had some flyers and handouts, and and good information. And if nothing else, we did some networking there, and now that opens up the chances to have exercises with the Silver Air Patrol and maybe get an air asset in there. The big thing to remember about the Silver Air Patrol is if it's a search, if the sheriff's looking for a missing person or a criminal or something like that, then we can use the Silver Air Patrol with no cost. If it's a recovery mission, then it opens up a cost to the county more. So it's just a coordinating thing on and what exactly do we need them for? Up until now, we didn't need them. The big recovery we had up in near Kingsbury County, that was a recovery mission, and we had a sheet of ice. So I mean, air would not have done anything for us at all. Our state and local, yesterday, our joint jurisdiction subcommittee, joint jurisdiction area subcommittee, mining subcommittee met, and that's going good. And our state and local agreement was turned in. May is Wildlife Awareness Month. We'll be doing a resolution a little bit later on that. Working on the budget. Next week, I'm meeting, tomorrow I'm meeting with the wind tower representatives. We have got another wind farm permitted in South Dakota. And it's looking like they're going to start construction. I won't be able to know until tomorrow afternoon. I'll be able to tell you the projected timelines, but we are meeting with them. Next week, I'm meeting with LG Everest and on some county business, and I've also invited the mining subcommittee, 2 members, to come join us on that particular meeting. And because the subcommittee, the committee, joint jurisdiction committee tasked us to talk to different mining interests and things like that. So since I've already got a meeting set up with LG Everest, we're going to go ahead and bring the other 2 members of the subcommittee in, and any questions they've got, we'll be able to answer there. And then we're also going to bring the other mining entities in one at a time and have a similar type meeting. May 9 and 10, me and Richard will be in Lake County assisting the state of South Dakota. They've got one of their exercises going on through emergency management. May 17th, I'm taking a representative from the finance office, and I want to thank the finance director for allowing that. We got an Emergency Operations Center exercise in Mitchell, which is a regional, our 10-county region, and we're gonna do the finance part of the exercise. And so we're going to take a representative from the finance office and let them see we know what we do in Brookings County. I felt it would be a good opportunity to let them see what goes on in other counties, because at the April 24th storm spotter training, it was mentioned that the last time that they saw weather like this winter is when they had Tornado Tuesday outbreaks, the big outbreaks. So they don't know if that's a forewarning or not, but it's been many years since we've had this type of a winter. You have to admit that, and it does get a little unsettled afterwards. So we'll play it by ear. But obviously, if one of our neighboring counties gets hit with a tornado, or if I get hit, we're going to pull assets in. Of course, I'll work through my liaison before I leave the county, but if someone needs our help, we've already supported other counties. Last but not least, flooding. Before I went to Deadwood over the weekend, I called Hamlin County, Dave Schaefer. Typically, he takes care of Lake Poncet in the initial stages for us, because we've got only a little bit, and Hamlin County's got the rest of it. So I called him and offered him any assistance that he needed, such as sandbags and stuff like that. And he actually called me while I was out in Deadwood and said that they did lay some sand out. They're not looking for reimbursement from us at this time. And the way the winds were over the weekend, the south winds pushed everything up into his neck of the woods anyway. But just to let you know, if they do call and need sandbags or something like that, I've got plenty that we're going to share with them. And right now, and the floodgates, they've opened the floodgates again. If you know anything about Lake Poncet, there's a set of floodgates up there. If the river is higher than the lake, they close it so nitrates don't get into the lake. And if it lowers, so the river must have lowered enough that they opened the floodgates to let some of the water down. Lake Poncet was 2 feet over, or 2 feet high when I talked to Dave on Thursday, and now it looks like it's dropped a little bit. So we'll keep you updated on that. And 6 Mile Creek has come down. We're getting reports that the Big Sioux River is starting to crest finally here. I think Sioux Falls is going to be in a little trouble still coming up, but as long as we don't get belly gushing water rains, we'll be all right. Any questions?
Were you outside last night? That was a gushing rain.
Oh,
It was nasty.
I heard it quite well.
Where is the wind tower company looking to build?
They are going to be between Buffalo Ridge 1, which is our county, the Minnesota line, and that Buffalo Ridge 2, which is already there.
Okay.
They're going to backfill, what's known as backfill.
Okay.
Mr. Barron?
Go ahead.
Bob, when you were talking to Madera Township, were you talking to Londa Hexum?
Londa Hexum, Mr. Hexum, and now he's going to shoot, Mark Richards.
Okay. Lana had called me last week. She had information from Mr. Gilbertson from the East Dakota that he had met out in Pierre with the Corps of Engineers and that they needed to come up with a plan of action. Is that correct?
And that's exactly what we discussed, and that's
Okay.
why my next step as county is to talk to Mr. Burke and get back to him. We're not going to do the work for him, but they're just asking some good questions about what needs to be done. Let's say to replace a culvert. What's the steps? And all I'm going to do is give them the steps. We're not committing. And I told them once they get the plan, then they can come to the county commission and discuss. I don't discuss things like financing or none of that. I can get help on what's the next step to replace a culvert. Right. Do you get an engineering firm or do you get this person or whatever? I can help them with that. But as far as funding and stuff like that, they will have to come to this board.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
Any
you.
other?
We do have the one be it noted item too.
I'm sorry, by all means. We got the local emergency planning committee, which has got its own little board, and the Homeland Security Office put out grants for planning and training. We really don't have an exercise in enough detail yet to get funding for, but we do have a hazardous materials plan that will be 5 years old when the date of this grant comes up. So I went ahead and submitted the paperwork. It had a deadline of last week. I went ahead and submitted the paperwork. This board will still have to approve it once the federal people give us, if they give us the money, it will be brought to this board for the final action. But it's a 80-20 match, and First Planning District always takes our part of the match out of the dues that we pay them. So it's no additional money from us. So I went ahead and, through the local emergency planning committee, submitted for the grant.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Come on up, Mike.
Good morning. I don't have a whole lot. Tomorrow we are going to have a conference call in regards to the rewriting of the statute as far as the welfare section is concerned. The other thing that happened is our secretary has gotten a new job for our welfare committee group, for the state group, so that kind of puts us in a little bit of a quandary there at this point anyway, and that's just on the state level. So as far as that, did go up to the campus one day last month to work with veterans at the VARC, and on the 8th we have our Salvation Army meeting. Other than that, the numbers in the office been staying about fairly consistent. We had 105 incoming phone calls. We had only 70 outgoing phone calls. We had 27 veterans stop in, and we had 17 on the welfare side.
Yeah.
Any questions? Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll move on to regular business. Item A, action to approve Resolution 18-13, a resolution emphasizing Brookings County, South Dakota's commitment to the Stepping Up initiative to reduce the number of people with mental illness in jails. Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion?
I did provide some additional information on that Stepping Up initiative on your desks this morning. This is Commissioner Bartley had brought this forward. We did share this resolution with Sheriff Stanwyck and Jail Administrator Sweeby as well, and they said basically what's in this resolution that they're already kind of in the process of doing, so they are okay with it as well. So.
I did have a question, and I don't know if I'm addressing it to Bart or to Marty, but when it talks about the convene people from multiple agencies committed to reducing the number of people in jail, do we already have a committee that's working on that? And which group is that?
Well, we're just the CIT team. We're in the process of developing a mobile CIT critical incident type situation with the police department. Is that your question? Am I answering it?
Yeah, I guess my question is, I didn't want to adopt the resolution and then not have the responsibility for doing what we're saying we're going to do in the resolution assigned somewhere. And so you're saying the CIT group is going to be responsible for us carrying out what we're saying in this resolution we're going to do?
Well, to some degree. Actually, we're already doing everything that's in that I can see we're already doing. We already have, if we have a mental health crisis in the county, we already have essentially behavioral health comes out with the council along with the police officer. And so we're doing those things already.
And there was quite a lot, the resolution contained quite a bit of information requiring data collection. Is that something your department's already doing then? Yeah.
We've been starting to do that for a period of time. Bart's been working with the city police and the state's attorney's office and the university police. That's what we're trying to do, is to try to gather how much is going on out there when it comes to mental health. And so far, we only got the information from the police department myself, or my department. But it's all about taking time. The state's attorney's office is busy in their office, and it takes a person to put that into the computer and so forth. But we're in the process of gathering that information.
So then it would be the sheriff's office that would be administering the Stepping Up initiative for the county. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item B, action to approve Resolution 18-14, a resolution supporting Wildfire Awareness Month.
So moved.
Any discussion?
I'm just here if you have any questions on it.
Anybody have any questions?
We talked about this at an earlier date, didn't we? I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
I brought this to your attention.
Right.
This is strictly, this is not forest fires and stuff like that. This is rural fire departments and prairie
Oh,
type
fighting
fires
grass
like
fires.
we have. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay.
And it's just showing our support of our local fire departments, in my opinion.
Right. It's not mutual aid agreement or nothing like that. Just support.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Item C, action to approve Agreement 18-51, a memorandum of understanding between Brookings County and the City of Brookings for the purchase, installation, and payment of 4 lighted stop signs at 22nd Avenue and 32nd Street South.
Move approval.
Second?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
I read it 2 different ways in the information that we got. It was my understanding we were purchasing the stop signs, and then the city was going to reimburse us in 2019 when their budget. But we got it both ways in the packet. At one point it said that the city was ordering the stop signs, and they would bill us. So I just want to know how it is.
The claim for the stoplights was approved with the claims today, the full amount.
I saw that and I thought, well, why does it say?
Why is the city ordering them?
Yeah.
Well, they ran into a financial problem. The city doesn't have $2,500 at this time, so after the first of the year, they will have the $2,500 to
Right. I get that. I knew that
Okay.
from the get-go, but but my question was, in some place, in the information that we had, it said that they were ordering it and we were going to reimburse them. But that isn't how it's actually happening.
No, that was initially exactly what was supposed to transpire, but when they couldn't find $2,500, they felt it'd be better if we ordered
Right.
them.
Okay.
So we
All
took
right.
care of it. They're
Wonderful.
in hand.
Then it is going the way that I had understood it was going to. That's all I
We're
need to know.
ordering them.
We're ordering
installing
them. They're going to
pay
reimburse
for 'em,
us.
They reimburse.
Yeah. It doesn't matter how.
Fine.
So the memorandum of
$2,500.
understanding then is incorrect, because the
It is
memorandum
incorrect.
of understanding says the city will order
Yeah.
4 red blinker stop signs and mounting equipment. So what it should read is the county will order those, and the county will pay the invoice,
Yeah.
and then the rest of it would be correct.
That's right. The memorandum is wrong.
Well, not necessarily, because we use their resource and let them order, but they billed us.
They didn't bill us.
No.
The
they-
city didn't bill us.
No.
The vendor billed us.
Yes.
But we used the city street department to order, their vendor to order the
Yeah.
lights.
So we got everything the same.
So it is correct then. The
It
city
is
Yeah.
correct. The
did
city,
order the
we
lights.
used, the city ordered it. They gave us the bill from the vendor. They did not pay it. We are not paying the city anything. We are paying the vendor directly.
Okay.
What they did is they used their vendor and they ordered them and then handed us the invoice from the vendor to pay it. We did that with the claims
And
this
they'll
morning.
reimburse us. And
The
okay,
MOU
I
is
get it.
And the
technically
signs are in.
correct.
Huh?
The signs are in, and the city will put them up as soon as they can.
The city or the county?
The city's going to put them up.
Really?
The county install.
Yeah.
They're waiting for the frost to come out.
Okay. Are we ready to vote?
Good grief! Such a simple thing that became
They're not-
so confusing.
Right, they're not going to charge us to put them in, right?
No, no, we're not paying to put them in.
All in favor of the motion?
I guess.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item D, action to approve Agreement 18-52, an application for occupancy of right-of-way of county highways made by Sioux Valley Energy.
Move
So-
approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item E, action to approve Agreement 18-53, an application for occupancy of right-of-way of county highways made by Sioux Valley Energy.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item F, action to approve Agreement 18-54, an application for occupancy of right-of-way of county highways made by Sioux Valley Energy.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item G, action to approve request to fill vacancy for a deputy sheriff in the sheriff's department.
Move approval.
Second.
Marty, did you want to add anything?
No, Deputy Gengler's been with me for about 3 years. He came from the Watertown Police Department. His wife just graduated from nursing school. She started at Hendricks, and she got what Deputy Gendler says her dream job. She's going to be a nurse at the Mayo Clinic, so he's following her to Rochester. So hate to lose him. He's a good deputy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We've got 3 minutes before our scheduled item. Are we able to handle item H in that amount of time?
That's wrong. It's actually 8:29.
Okay.
Nine.
Then
Or
we're going
9:29,
to,
I mean.
we're going to go ahead and start our scheduled agenda item that was set for 9:30, presentation of exterior design options for the jail expansion project.
Stacy, did you want us to pull our computer up, or are you?
And once we get all the electronics set up, I'm going to have each one of you introduce yourselves. Of
course.
Thank you.
While we are setting up the electronics, I can start talking a little bit about schedule as far as what's planned, excuse me, in the upcoming weeks. So we have an item to discuss regarding the site survey, which Stacy can probably pull up, or we can just, we had 4 proposals for site survey. They range from $3,200 to $5,300. We discussed with each of them. They're making sure that their proposal was valid and that they're ready to perform the work. Our recommendation is to award to the low proposal, which would be Foresight Land Surveyors. They had the $3,200 proposal. So we would suggest that we award to that firm, and our goal is to have that survey done by the 17th of May. There's not a hard and fast deadline for that, but we'd like to have the information as soon as possible. So that would be our suggestion.
What exactly is the site survey? What does that mean?
So that would be identifying exactly the grades on site, so the elevations of everything, and also the exact dimensional qualities of what's there on site right now.
The exact qualities of what?
Dimensional qualities, so exact sizes and shapes of every element of the site. Where trees are located, where the building lines are in relation to the property lines, it just gives us the exact identification of everything that's on site right now.
Is that also soil types and?
That's not soil borings.
Oh,
That's
not.
just dimensions. Soil borings would be separate, and we will do that in the future once we have some designs more set. So if that site survey is done by the 17th, the next meeting that was suggested was a public open house to discuss the same things you'll be seeing today. That would be on May 14th. The detention committee workshop, the next one of those would be scheduled for suggested to be scheduled for the 15th. If the 15th doesn't work, the other suggested date was the 21st of May. Then following that, we'd be submitting again to the Historic Preservation Committee on May 25th. And that meeting from the next Historical Commission meeting would be on June 14th. So those would be kind of the upcoming dates that were discussed. Any questions about those or what would be presented in any of those meetings?
Is any action needed by us on the site survey?
Yes, you do need to take action on the site survey. That's on the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve Foresight Land Surveyors for the site survey.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, second.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. As relates, I have a question before you move on to the next thing. Is that a hard date now on the May 14th open house?
That's open to the commissioners. You'd have to decide on whether you'd like to have that meeting.
Yeah, this schedule is up for approval by the commission. These were just suggested dates that we were given. So with today's presentation, site survey now moves forward. Now do you want to have a public open house? Do you feel that that's needed? And then if so, then we need to get that scheduled and what works best for everyone.
Is that something you want to see the designs before we decide if we're ready for the open house? Let's go ahead and go on with the presentation, then we'll come back to that.
Sure. All right, well, I apologize to some of you have seen some of this before, so some of it's going to be redundant. Some is definitely new. I'm just going to start going through what we had actually talked to the commission about. So we did have a meeting, went through proposed exterior designs. Some of you were there for that meeting. So again, a little bit redundancy, but if you want to go to the next slide. So the first thing we presented, and we'll present again, is some historical precedents of other historic courthouse additions. Some of these are local to the upper Midwest, some of them are national or even international, but you're able to see that there are a number of precedents for adding on to or near historic courthouses. Again, to be clear, we are not technically adding on to this courthouse, we're adding on to the law enforcement center, we're not touching the courthouse, But again, this shows you things that have happened in historical precedents near historic courthouses. So it's certainly not unprecedented to add on or near a historic courthouse. A number of the ones that are on that first slide are in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota. There's some from the South. There's a lot of examples of different ways to add on to historic courthouses. Some of the ones you see kind of mimic the courthouses and mimic some of the detailing. Some go in a completely different direction and try to do something that is in keeping with the character of the historic building, but is not a direct mimicry of the building. Go to the next one, Chris. A few more examples. Again, you see some, look at the top right, that's more of a modern interpretation. The top left, which is a Minnesota county, Freeborn County, which is more of a direct like mimicking of the courthouse. So there's a lot of different ways that this can be done, and it just gives you some precedent of ways it's been done in the past. Some successful, some less so, but certainly a lot of example projects. So a few weeks ago, our design team came out and did somewhat of a design charrette, touring both at the university, around town, some of the historic sites near the existing courthouse, also just some sites in the surrounding neighborhoods to get some design context for what we'd be looking at. We wanted to take kind of a fresh set of eyes on the overall design process and look at what's in the neighborhood, what keeps with the character of that. So this is just sort of a map that shows you some of the projects that we looked at, some of the existing buildings, some of the surrounding community. So here's some images from that. It's some of the neighborhood fabric, that what we're calling it, some of the buildings that surround the courthouse. You can see the Law Enforcement Center, obviously on the same block. Across the street, the Presbyterian Church, Children's Museum down the block, this building, the City County Government Center, some of the historic downtown buildings, the public library, the courthouse addition. There's already an addition on the back of the courthouse. The 1921 building across the street. So these were some of the precedents that we looked at to say, what happens in the neighborhood fabric that we can start to inform our designs with. As far as the site, just down the street at the Children's Museum, there's a little bit of precedent for some landscape that occurs on that block. We looked at the context of the site plan of bringing that same design landscape context up into the proposed addition and the area surrounding it. So some of our priorities when we started to look at this was respecting the courthouse, maintaining the historic courthouse as the primary focus of the site, respecting the design language of the buildings on site and the surrounding neighborhood, also utilizing detailing and massing that's appropriate for this type of building, a civic building, and still having a pedestrian-friendly experience for people who are coming from the surrounding neighborhoods, and then enhancing the overall experience of the courthouse square with a building that's tasteful and represents something that is a benefit to the community. This is something that not everyone has seen recently. This is actually the current floor plan. So it shows you what different departments and areas, how this building is going to function. You can see where the housing portion is, where intake happens. You can see some of the support services, just to give you a little bit of the context of how this building is going to work and function. I know that's something really the Sheriff's Department has been more involved in than the committee or the board, but just wanted to give you kind of an update on where we're at with that. You'll see that there's slight variations in some of these designs on how the exterior works, but basically this floor plan stays the same in all of those variations. Any questions on the floor plan? Can you go back to that for a second? This is something that wasn't in the committee packet last time, so it's new to this presentation.
Do we have safe rooms, I guess? Where would they be at?
Yeah, Chris can point to them actually right over from that, Chris, those two blue rooms. It's those two rooms right there, Commissioner. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Bart.
That's a separate entrance to those safe rooms, so they don't come through the booking area.
Are the safe rooms in the potential juvenile rooms the same, or?
No, the juvenile rooms are over in the booking area.
And where are those then on?
No,
on here?
orange.
This is booking.
Okay, so juvenile holding cells would be where?
Right to the right of where your cursor is.
Right
The
where
back wall
0
there.
is. We could use those safe rooms if they're not in use for juvenile if we had to. So that'll give us some extra space.
So the two safe rooms are identified under public spaces? Is that with that color
That's
code?
correct. Yep.
Okay.
And
No.
those rooms meet the federal requirements for out of sight, out of sound for juveniles then?
Yes.
There's no other questions on this. We can move on. All right, so this first design concept is actually what had kind of a variation on what had been presented previously. So we just kind of refined it a bit. So this was what we were calling option A. You can scroll through it kind of quickly. So you'll see in some of these, there's a version that has some trees, and then we just turned off the trees so the building itself was clearer. In some of these options, there's not a difference between them. It's just with or trees or with trees turned off. So this was the kind of design concept that had been presented originally. It kind of has the classicalness of the courthouse, but not a lot of detail to it. It was kind of a very straightforward option. The other two options, B and C, that you'll see are what was presented to the commission last time. And then you'll see a secondary option that was a kind of a melding of the two that's going to be called option D. And as the commissioner asked, we should have introduced ourselves. So I'm Anthony Enright. I'm with BKV Group. With me here is Chris Hutton. Dave, Chris, you want to introduce yourself? And Dave?
Yeah, so Chris Hutton, BKV, been with the firm for about 7 years. So.
And David Warner, architectural designer with BKV.
So again, we had our designers kind of take a fresh look at the overall exterior design for this. So I'll let them present options B, C, and D.
So as we move into option B, and please tell me if I need to speak up. Option B starts to draw off the existing rhythms of the courthouse. The courthouse, can you scroll to the front? The next. The courthouse has an A, B, C, B, A rhythm, which is established by the prominent wing on the end, and then a receded element in between the true prominent entrance of the building, and the prominent entrance becoming proud at the very center of the building, then the building receding again. So I'm talking to your existing courthouse here. Chris can kind of guide me with the mouse. So you establish an A, a B, a C at the center, and then a B again, and then an A. That is just sort of a rhythm that then gets drawn into the elements that architecturally sort of express the design of B, where these portals do the same thing. You see these portals at the end that become an A, a recessed B with a window, then a central C, B, A rhythm. That sort of changes in scale as it goes around the building. That whole west facade starts to replicate that same idea with the two recessed doors. It does the same thing at the vehicle sally port entrances. And it develops that same language as it wraps around the east and north facades. We, in this version, are showing high windows. When we met with the commission last time, we went back and forth on whether or not the windows should be high for sort of an institutional expression, or if they should come down and sort of have more pedestrian scale. We're showing both in this option, and we would love feedback from the commission on those sort of design options. Here you have a sort of decorative element expressed in the one portal that is sort of without its central point of emphasis. That decorative element is drawing inspiration from the existing courthouse cupola and the detailing of the window mullions. It's taking that, sort of scaling it up, inverting it, and bringing it down to the ground to make that sort of expression more readable, recognizable, and give it a pedestrian scale. That same sort of element is expressed on the front side of the building, again, the west face, as a reveal in a granite portal. That is sort of a central emphasis moment of the western expression, the western facade. Granite portals break the roof line at the vehicle entrances to the sally port, create a little bit more sort of material emphasis there. And a heavy granite base sort of picks up the size and scale of the base of the existing courthouse and carries its way all the way through the existing LEC building as a way of sort of unifying the existing LEC with the option B design.
Chris, can you go to the materials slide for a second?
We'll need you to speak into the microphone, I'm sorry.
There's a brick material that's being shown in some of the options, which is kind of a light toned brick, a limestone material that would closely match the existing courthouse. And then in all of the options, you'll see there's a granite material used in some cases, like Dave was saying, in larger portions, in most cases used as just a base, the same way it's used on the courthouse.
Quick question. On the existing detention center, is there any changing that there or tying those two in?
Yeah, in all of the options, we are looking at doing two things to the detention center, existing law enforcement center, we'll call it. One is removing some of those really heavy cornice elements that you see at the detention center and simplifying that. So you can see in all the options, it's kind of a simplified cornice that's being done, and then also doing treatment to the brick that will change the color of the brick so that it ties in better with the limestone of the courthouse. So that would be a stain or some sort of paint that would change the color of the brick. Probably a stain that will lighten it a bit.
And then in option B and C, an additional layer of treatment to the existing LEC is here. We're carrying that granite base expression across the LEC to, again, unify the LEC to the option B, and a similar treatment is done in option C.
Okay, so option C, something you'll notice in option C is that material, the brick, the stone, and the granite are used in a way on each facade to relate to the building that it's adjacent to. Starting on the east, you'll see mostly brick as it relates and is connected to the LEC building. And then as it wraps around to the north, it's a mix of brick and stone. And on the west facade becomes, if I can get there, past it. On the west facade becomes all stone. And so this option is using materials to, really blend itself into the context and the surrounding buildings, which will make it feel like this new addition was always part of the design and really unifies the LEC with the courthouse. Something else you'll notice on option C, on the north facade, this is where the building is not directly tied to either of the LEC or the courthouse, and so there's room for the jail to have its own expression. And so you'll see these large bronze elements kind of protruding slightly out of the north side of the building. And that's really drawing from the cupola. The metal top of the cupola is a kind of a bronze element, and it's really the only bronze element on the courthouse, so it's used very sparingly on the courthouse. And so in turn, on the jail edition, they would be used sparingly only on this north facade for these elements that really give the building its own character. And so this doesn't make sense necessarily on the west facade because we want to really respect the courthouse. And so you'll notice that the west facade that we're looking at here is stone. There's some columns. And here we're showing lower windows on this facade. And there's a little stone cap on those windows to kind of make the size of those openings the same as the courthouse it's next to. And you'll also see that there's some little bronze elements on the north and west facades. This gives a little bit of character. It unifies the building as you go around. Have a little these three bronze elements that connect the whole building all the way around. And these really relate to the main entrance of the courthouse. There is a little recess that's very subtle, but it's in the main portal entrance of the courthouse. And so what I've done is kind of flip that. Instead of being a recess, it's now a small expression of bronze. And so going back to the east facade, there's a couple of different options on the east facade. The original one that was presented, these were low windows. And there was some discussion whether that's appropriate for the jail. Does it have a prominence that these higher windows like an option B has? And so we've tried a couple of different options to show what higher windows would look like. And then one here that more closely ties to the bronze elements on the north side.
Talk a little bit about the law enforcement center
Yep, so on the law enforcement, just like the other options, we're going to be stripping off that the kind of intricate cornice that's on there right now, making it more simple. And also in this option, we would be cladding that main LEC entrance with bronze as well, giving it kind of an expression, and then doing that also at the jail, the main entrance to the jail. So again, this is a move that would tie the LEC and the jail together, make all these buildings speak the same language, and feel like they're all one building.
So we got some good feedback from the commission, and what we went back to, you saw a few of the little options we looked at after the commission meeting. Then the last thing we looked at was a fourth option, which we're calling option D, which was really a melding of the two, B and C, which were the two that the commission thought were the most successful. There was a lot of, personal preferences on which of the two was the best one to proceed with. So the commission really wanted us to look at and bring to the county board a fourth option that tied both of those ideas together in a cohesive way that didn't necessarily water down the concept, but maybe just gave them another option to look at and gave you as a board something that combined both of those ideas. So this is option D, and I'll let Chris talk to that a bit.
Yeah, so the last time we met, we were talking about how B and C were successful in different ways, and that the commission wanted to see, what the two of them kind of blended together would be. And we spoke that it was kind of understood that you can't just stick the two together because it would, each option B and C have their own integrity. They draw from different inspiration. And so D is a combination of B and C, but it has its own, it takes on a life of its own. And so you see that the colonnade from option B is very prominent on the north and east facades, and the higher windows as well, really kind of pulling from that option B. And then the smaller entrance portion of the jail gets treated a little bit different than the other options. It's got these brick columns that rise up and kind of bring this colonnade through, all the way through this entrance, kind of treating it as just a part of the colonnade that happens around the building. Something else that ties D together all the way around the building is the stone ribbing that actually in the courthouse is an inverse. So the courthouse, they have stone, like a stone ribbing, and the ribbing that you see is actually a recess into the stone. And on the jail building, that would be actually, those small recesses would actually be an expression coming out of the stone. And that actually happens at the same scale and dimension as the courthouse all the way around the entire building, really unifying it together. And here on the west facade, you see this colonnade continues, and there's, it's brick actually, the columns and the top element of the colonnade are brick, and then everything that's embedded behind that would be stone all the way around. And so this option really tried to tie the two together and using the colonnade, but really using this west facade that the commission really liked on option C, keeping it mostly the same, but adding this colonnade that ties the whole building together.
You'll also notice that there's a combination at the cap of the building of the bronze cap at the high portions and then the stone cap at the lower portions, which is something that the commission had liked. On some of the options, they really liked the bronze cap and how that tied into the courthouse, but they also liked the combination of the high portions and the low portions just to give the building a little bit more expression as it moves around. So we're open to questions, comments, opinions. We did put something together that shows you all of them, all the options combined in one. That was something that the commission mentioned. It'd be nice to be able to see everything together and say, we like this element is more successful.
Are the Sally Port doors, what are the material of those?
So in all the options, the Sally Port doors are a dark bronze metal material. So it would match the bronze that happens either on the elements or the cap.
And I know this isn't a design question, but I just would like to know, the old part of the jail where the sheriff's office is now, is the sheriff's office going to remain over there? Where's the traffic flow? Is it going to be coming through on this west side of the new center, or will it still, a lot of the traffic be coming in through the door that they currently come in through?
Which traffic do you mean? The 24/7 traffic will come on the east side. All jail traffic will go through the doors are enclosed.
So
anybody that's in custody will go into the Sallyport garages. But the 24/7 traffic will still come on the entrance on the east side of the building.
So those things that are high traffic, like 24/7, when you're booking somebody, you just have one, hopefully, patrol car. But where there are people, like when they're coming to visit people in the detention center, will they come through the jail door, or will they come through the other door? Okay. And I'm really wondering how much traffic that west door is going to have on that west side.
Well, it'll have the same traffic if you have now, except they'll be inside in an inner lobby and stuff. So you're talking, just when I gave my report today, you'll have 140, I have 142 on 24/7, so you'll have that traffic.
But they'll be on the east side.
It'll be on the east.
On the east side. Yeah, the west doors that we showed that have the little recesses are going to have very little traffic.
And that's what I wanted to know.
The only real traffic that would be coming in that door would be something like a bail bondsman who would come in that west door.
What was that? Something
A
like
bail bondsman.
Okay.
So that's, I mean, there's not public traffic on that west side.
Okay.
It would be some very specialized traffic.
And the deliveries to the kitchen and stuff, that will come through the Sallyport, or will they come on that west side?
You know, that the sheriff could answer that. There is a way you could come in on the west side. As to whether that operationally would be their preference, that would be a question for the sheriff and Bart.
The problem I have now is that the in-custody traffic and the 24/7 traffic come into the same area. Now it'll be split. People that are not confined or under arrest will come in the 24/7 area. And then the individuals that are in custody will go through the garages, and everything will be behind the walls of the garages.
So the 24/7 traffic would come in this door here, and as would public who are visiting would come in that door there. So there's the reason we have that entrance as, you know, a somewhat prominent entrance that you can, as a public member, understand that that's a place you might interact with this building, is because of the amount of traffic that would be coming in there. Of course, we're not trying to highlight that entrance as some grand entrance, but we do want it to read as this is a place as the public you could interact with this building.
Other questions?
This is the time, too, if you have any comments on the designs, if you want to see something different, if you want to see,
All right. Well,
have any questions on that. I'm
gonna
kind of
open-
looking at you because Ryan, you're the one that you weren't at the
You weren't
initial jail expansion committee, so you're newest to these
Okay. Well,
pictures. But
I'll throw my 2 cents in for what it's worth. I guess I kind of like, what I liked about option C was when I look at I'm viewing a certain side, I want them to tie in together. And I like when I'm looking at the front part of the jail that it ties in together on that side. And then if I'm on the west side looking east and I see the courthouse, that those two tie in together. I like that idea. Because courthouse isn't the same as the detention center. They have different architecture too. So to be able to keep those consistent which way you're looking at, because when you look one direction, you're not looking at the side or the other side, you're looking at that front. And that's when, except at the angle of these pictures that we're taking on. So I like that idea. And I understand the windows high, I guess I don't know how to talk to, sheriff on safety issues and different stuff of those windows. If it make that much of a difference, it seems like when the windows are lower, it seems much more of a friendly type of a walking area atmosphere that, if the windows are high, it's like, okay, don't get close to that building type of thing, Windows lower, to me, gives more of a friendly feeling and more of not an office building style, but, something to that type of thing that I shouldn't have to be worried about anything, and not that I would be, but so I kind of like C. I'm not a big fan of the roof line portion of it. So I guess my 2 cents to it would be I like option C with the roof line of D, I guess, of how that one would work out. But using those same types of things, I think keeping the brass and consistent with the roof lines of the existing jail there. So those would be, I guess, my options there. But I like them a lot better than the first one. Put it that way.
I think that was the general consensus of the commission was once they saw options B and C, option A definitely receded in everyone's mind as not a viable option to proceed with.
Right. Yeah, and again, option C, I like the tying in of the entrances, both on those east entrances too, because it seems like that's where most of that public is going to be coming into. That's what they're going to see a lot of there too. Obviously, they'll come in on the courthouse on the other side. So, but I like tying those two entrances in with the way that the architecture is on C also.
Thank you.
And that matches up. C and D is the same, or are they different? I can't tell a difference.
C and D are different. So if you look at Chris can talk to some of the differences between C and D.
There's more brass in the
Yeah.
C.
So C and D are similar. When we're looking at the northeast perspective, you'll notice that they both have higher windows on the east facade, and they both have columns of brick, but really in D, it's more of a expression that was pulled from option B of the portal. The brick kind of comes up and around and down.
I didn't ask my question right.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay. The doorways going into the old part of the jail, are they the same? I think that's what Ryan was talking about.
I see.
Where the public will be entering. I can't really tell a whole lot of difference except for that overhang.
Yep, so they're similar. Option D actually does have an element that sticks out, a canopy, thank you, that's bronze. And option C, there isn't a canopy, but it has a portal element of bronze that would match the LEC entrance.
There is not. I was thinking that there was a canopy on C, but there's not. Okay, that's more just the architect's accent around the top of the door.
Correct.
Yep, the bronze element actually comes up, and there's actually an airspace underneath where the canopy comes over, which kind of matches what happens at the LEC. There's a lot of openness in that element, the entrance element.
All right. I appreciate the fresh look.
Thank you.
I think it's made a difference.
Yeah, I think so too.
So where do we go from here?
I guess you want to answer, don't you?
I guess we'd like direction on how to proceed. I mean, or at the very least, direction from the board to send this back to the commission and have them provide recommendations on how to proceed.
What's the public open house for? Is that just to show what we've chosen? Is that something to get public input?
And I think that is probably the first decision that needs to be made. Are you going to go into that public open house with several design options and try to get input from the public on the design of the building? Or are you going to, as a commission, say, this is the design we like, this is what we plan on moving forward with, and then have that public open house with that one design option and then allow people to comment on the one design option versus 4 design options? That's where we're at right now. I mean, looking even further into the timeline, we wanted this before we presented made the next presentation to the Historical Preservation Commission as well.
Right.
Our deadline, if we want, and I know, and maybe you still aren't concerned about the deadline there, the next deadline is May 25th. So that's kind of what we've been kind of pushing towards, is to get our
May 20, that will put us on
the
June.
June agenda
Yeah.
for the Historic Preservation Commission.
Well, and keeping in mind that they technically have 180 days for their comments. So there's not a push to that may certainly is a deadline, but there's a lot of time that could be an intervening time for them to still be looking at things. So we're just trying to push things ahead and not stall the process.
Could somebody remind me, because I don't remember, when we were in front of Historic Preservation, they came back and said you need to submit the following. What were those things that they wanted?
So there were 5 things that they wanted. They mostly had to do with, did we look at the historic context around the building? They wanted some clarity on some of the financial information that we had in the presentations in regard to the cost per square foot of the buildings, and also probably the main and driving force was they wanted more information on what had been looked at for off-site options and the financials around that. There was a lot of pushback from the commission about whether or not the county had truly explored the off-site option or if it was just being rejected out of hand. So we have fully explored that, and I think getting some more information from the sheriff and jail administrator about some of the costs for the staffing of that was a big push from the commission.
Okay, so would you list those 5 things one more time?
I don't have all 5 right in front of me, so I don't want to go on record of exactly what they were, but that was the gist of them. Maybe Stacy has those in front of her.
I believe we addressed those questions at our last meeting.
We did.
Right.
Yep.
And this was a final. We kind of wanted to narrow it down to our options so we can move forward. With the
Commissioner,
open,
there wasn't a lot of discussion about the actual design of the building in that historic preservation meeting, which it was a lot of discussion about the intangibles that surround the project and the necessity for the project itself.
Stacy, are you able to pull up that letter?
Four things here. So is that it, or was it 5?
It could have just been 4.
What I have, Commissioner Pierce, is the costs of the proposed project as compared to the off-site options. To include construction, operational, and other investment costs.
And other investment costs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The construction costs to verify figures provided in case report. Does this sound familiar to you?
This is the right list.
Okay. And third is building dimensions to include height and width.
Yep.
There you go.
That's it. It's in front of you.
Thank you. Do we have all of this information now if we're planning on going to the...
The 4th item we are going to discuss at our next committee meeting. That's actually has been further developed by the sheriff and Bart. The other items we've had for quite some time.
Are those costs, is that in the form of an exhibit that we're going to have an opportunity to see before they're sent to historic preservation?
Yes.
Okay. And when are you thinking if you want to be at historic preservation to meet the May 25th deadline, you're saying we'll be seeing those at our next commission meeting then?
We were talking about the next detention committee workshop being on the 15th and submitting the additional information on the 25th.
Okay.
'Cause
So
we were
we
hop-
have a county commission meeting on May 15th, and we would not have another one then.
No, with that time frame, we would not be, the committee cannot meet on the 15th. They'd have to meet in the afternoon because our next commission meeting is the 15th,
Sure.
the morning of,
And we could provide the same
So-
information to the county board that we would provide to the
to the
commission.
committee.
So the county board would have an opportunity to see it before the committee saw it.
And we would see that at our meeting on May 15th.
Yes.
And with hoping to have that the open house on the 14th, correct?
Correct.
So how are you addressing in the form of the paperwork those 4 items that are listed there? Are you having a specific response set out for each one of those items?
Yes. So we'll have specific responses to each of the items. The first one, the cost of the proposed project, there was some question from the committee about, because different costs were presented on different dates, there were different actual square footage costs. I mean, there was literally almost a year between one set of estimates and another. So with some clarification about why the different square footage costs were done. So that would be item 2. Item 1, the cost of the proposed project compared to the offsite options. There was just a little bit of, I guess you could say, question on the operational costs that were related to that and whether or not those were comprehensive or accurate. So we'll address that. And then building dimensions, we have a graphic put together that shows the dimensions of the existing building, surrounding buildings, and the proposed addition.
I have a concern that if you're meeting, when's the committee meeting to discuss all those things again?
The 15th.
The 15th, and the commission is meeting on the 15th, that we are not going to have enough time to look at stuff and have it ready to be at historic preservation on the 25th. What if we look at those documents and we say, we need additional information for this, or this doesn't really answer the question that was raised by historic preservation. I just don't want us to be pushed to say, send this in. We've already had a couple of meetings where our paperwork wasn't
Sure.
the way I would like to see our paperwork.
Well, we were hoping the 10 intervening days would be enough to get feedback and also to make changes, but certainly if you'd like to have more time than that, we can.
Well, I think we can shoot for the 24th. If we need more time, that's not a hard deadline.
No,
I mean, we don't
certainly
have to do it by then, but I think we should shoot for it.
But I guess what my question is right now, I'm thinking you might know number 3 because you've got all these drawings. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. But the other 3 things that are being asked for on there, that's really narrative stuff. If either do you have that information now? Is there a reason we can't see it now?
I don't have it with me, but we do have it prepared.
Didn't you present that at our last workshop?
We did not present it at our last workshop.
But you
we
gathered more data on the cost. You explained that to us.
Yep. And we've discussed it at our workshop, but we have not presented that to you yet.
Okay, well, we don't have to decide on the 24th now. You're saying we can do it on the 15th
Well,
once we see the.
And Commissioner, we could send that, tomorrow if you wanted, and give you ample time to look at it between now and when we meet on the 15th.
That would be very nice.
Okay. Sure.
The other thing, if we're going to do an open house or when we go to historic preservation, whichever one, always there's the issue on parking. And Stacy has put together the data on the parking. And I think we need something that is a professionally prepared exhibit on parking.
And we have developed that.
Okay.
Stacy's seen it. I don't think you've shared that with the board yet, though. Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
We need to come up with.
Sure. We've developed a graphic that graphically explains all the parking in the neighborhood and how it works.
Okay.
So we do have that as well.
We had that at our last meeting, didn't we?
Right.
We did.
Yeah,
We did
yeah,
have that at
yeah.
our last meeting. Just hasn't been shared with the full board.
Okay.
The item 4 on there is really something that's been further developed by the sheriff and Bart. I don't have that in front of me as well, but maybe the sheriff can address when that may be available for the board.
Well, what I'd like to see is the actual professional-looking document that is intended to be submitted, so we can read it and look and see if we see any math issues, that sort of thing, and that all of that can be addressed. So that's kind of where I'm at. I talked more. Did anybody else have anything they'd like to say?
We need to pick a design, I think.
I really like Design D. I think it combines, there was public input at the last meeting that we had. This design does show the differences. I know we've talked a lot about those windows, and Commissioner Krogman, I understand what you're saying, and it's important everybody understand that those windows aren't really windows. There's no window behind there.
They're not a vision window that you could look into. They're a window, but they aren't something where as a public you could walk along and look into them. They'll have a film on them, so they won't be a viewing window.
Did the committee have a preference on the designs once you got all 4 of them?
The committee hasn't seen option
no.
D. The
We just
committee
got
met,
D.
yeah, and gave opinions, and that's what led to option D. But the committee has not.
This is a result of our last meeting.
Yes.
So the whole committee is
You haven't
not.
seen that.
No.
I mean, what's yours, since you guys saw it before? Because, I mean, it's not much different than C for me, I guess.
D looks fine to me.
And I agree. I like D. For what it's worth, Commissioner Bartley, after our last meeting, he was happy with B and C. He said whatever design he'd be in favor of. So his only comment was, remember, it is a jail. So,
And he was at that meeting.
Yes.
yes,
And had input on the changes that were made to D.
correct.
That were incorporated in D, I should say.
Well, and we should clarify too that these options were sent out a while ago, and we did get input between then and this meeting. And the input wasn't terribly specific, but there was a little bit of comments on.
Yes, option D was created, and then it was sent out to the committee for comments.
Correct.
And we didn't get many comments
Right.
back, so I don't.
And I do appreciate the explanation on how the rhythm is on the building, the A, B, C, kind of clarifies what you're looking at. And I guess I'm with option D myself, so.
So I think then going forward, that is what should be presented at the open house, and then we take comments on that.
Commissioner, would you like us to present the options that were looked at and then say option D was the preference, or would you like us to just present option D? I guess part of our discussion that we wanted to make sure the public feels that understands that multiple options were looked at and that this was a process and it wasn't just something that was, automatically jumped to. So
I agree, because I think you can take where we've started with option A and look at that progression to where I think the board is, kind of going a consensus with D.
I know
kind of where we started and where we ended up.
Right. There had been some comments or public comments about, the design hasn't really been looked at, it hasn't been explored. And I think showing the process somewhat clarifies that it has been explored and wasn't just something that was, a hasty decision made by the board or by the commission but of course that's up to you. I mean, how it's presented is entirely up to the board.
Well, I think what do you think, board?
I
Is it
think
present them and
they should,
and tell them that option D is the one that we have chosen?
I mean, we could start out, we can do that poster thing and show the square block that we've showed many times, and then show each of these different ones. And then we had our public meeting, and I think some of the people that were in the audience that day are here today again, and that this is the combination from the comments taken at that meeting.
And I had stated before we started that we weren't going to take public input. However, there was public input, which was good. And so they did have a little bit of a say-so in it. So I think
Sounds
it's
like a
fine.
plan.
I think it's fine to present them, and then
Sounds good.
option D is the one we chose.
So we're looking at May 14th?
for the open house.
Yeah.
That's what proposed.
I believe 6 or 6:30 is what had been thrown out there, but again, time is flexible.
Sheriff, do you mind if we have the open house without you being there, since you can't be there that night? So what time on the 14th?
I have a 7 o'clock family commitment, so if we could do it at 6, I could be there for the first hour.
And how about 5:30? I just think then people that want to come would come straight from
I
work.
agree. They come straight from work.
Sure.
I think 5:30 is better.
That would be fine.
Okay. And I have a 7 o'clock meeting, so.
I have nothing. Nobody wants me.
So how about if we start at 5:30? Open house for the jail.
5:30 to 7.
Well, I think
and
an
then
hour.
I guess our open question would be, how much of what we presented today would you like shown? The site, the floor plan, should those be part of the presentation, or would you like it to be limited to the exterior design?
I guess the floor plan needs to be available, don't it? And if there's questions on the floor plan, maybe.
We could literally show exactly what we've shown today, and if you're comfortable with that being open to the public. I mean, it's open to the public now, so.
The only comment I have on that, I'm sorry I interrupted,
No.
is at the meeting, the Jail Expansion Committee meeting, you gave a brief presentation about the different structures in the neighborhood and how this fit in. And I thought that was just excellent. And I don't know if you could incorporate some of that into our open house.
Yep.
That
we
was
certainly
really
can.
good.
Yeah, I abbreviated that here today,
Yeah.
but we can certainly expand on that.
I think
with the
that's
open house.
probably a good idea.
Okay.
And I guess on the floor plan, I think it's good to have that there.
Yeah.
Just the questioning, though, as long as the sheriff there, Barter there, because that was kind of your guys' design and stuff, along with the architects and stuff too. So questions for us on the design on the floor plan would be a little bit harder for us. So as long as you're there with those questions, I don't have a problem with that.
But do you know what my suggestion would be on that floor plan?
Mm-hmm.
Off to the side where you have the colors and what they are, a little more detail, because I don't want us, if somebody asks us where the safe rooms are, I don't want us to guess. We need to know where the safe rooms are. So I think off to the side of public space, we could put in parentheses, safe rooms.
We could show all of the room names. We weren't sure how comfortable we
I
were with that
really
sort of
think that it's
information.
important to do that.
Okay.
And
We
I
can
think
easily
the,
show them all.
I think the juvenile, is another thing
Yep,
too,
same
because
thing.
one of the main driving reasons for this expansion is the separation
Mhm. Sure.
of juveniles, mentally, struggling with mental health, not having to put them in with felons. And so I think that's important for me to see on that floor plan that this is accomplishing that.
Yep, we'll just turn on all the room names and
All right,
have that
sounds
available.
good.
And will that then be like on a big poster board so that it'll be blown up and look nice and people
We can
look
provide
at it?
a poster as well. We were planning on doing a digital presentation like we did today, but we can also do boards if you think that would be helpful.
I think so.
I think we should have boards so people can walk around and look
Sure.
at all of this stuff that you've
Okay.
got.
We'll do floor plans and also the 2 images of the chosen exterior design.
Do you want to give a specific time for the presentation? The open house is going to be from 5:30 to 7, presentation at 6?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
What else? Is there anything else on the schedule that we need to talk about other than what we've just said?
I think so.
We've got the public meeting and we've got the survey. And
Yeah, I think we should try to push forward on this timeline. We've
Okay.
been delayed enough as
I
it is
agree.
and stuff. And
It's costing us more. Every
day.
delay we have
Exactly.
costs us
So
more money.
if we can get the comments by July or June, and if they take 180 days, we'll be end of the year already. So we're not even going to be looking at anything even bidding till 2019 anyway. So
let's have that parking exhibit on a poster that people can look at it and see what we're doing with parking.
Sure, of course.
The only other question I had would be for the committee. What do you see as their task following, if they're not going to meet prior to the public open house?
So
Do
Stacy,
we have a specific task for them
Yeah,
prior to submission of?
Yeah, that was our intent for that next meeting, was to go over in great detail exactly what we plan to submit to the Historic Preservation Committee and just make sure everyone is comfortable with the exact data that's being submitted.
You're going to send that out here within the next couple of days so
Yeah.
that we have plenty of time for review of
Yep,
that? Okay.
let's commit to by Monday of next week. We'll have that out to everyone.
Okay. So do you still want to have that jail expansion committee meeting on the 15th? The afternoon of the 15th?
Do we
I think
need-
you want.
We don't need it.
I don't think so either.
Well, has the committee made a recommendation of a floor plan, or are we? I mean,
No, and
They-
no.
No.
And I think we're doing that.
Okay.
And I think that's how it should be.
I really think the committee needs to go over those numbers and be sure everybody's comfortable with the numbers. But can't that be done by email before the 15th?
Yep,
Yep.
absolutely.
I don't think we need to have a meeting.
No.
Really, the active committee only consists of one person other than most of the people that are here.
Are here.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate your
Thank
coming.
you.
Another
Commissioner.
step forward.
thank
Yes.
you, fellas, for your design. Good job incorporating what we were talking about.
We are going to take a 15-minute, or excuse me, a 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back to our agenda.
You think so? I hope so. Yeah, we do. If we can make it. Yeah, I think we gotta.
And we'll move to item H on regular business. Action to approve a request by the Brookings Farmer Market to close the 300 block of 6th Avenue from 7 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. on Saturdays from May through October.
Move approval.
We have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
How, I guess any comments on how it went last year, or?
We're having technical difficulties. The monitors at the dais are showing the dot cam, and the one on the overhead is correct. I don't know if something's messed up. Oh, there we go. Sean's working his magic behind the curtain back there.
Okay, so I guess any comments on how it went last year and everything like that, or any comments from any of our employees that had issues with it, or courthouse? Did the courthouse have any issues with it?
I haven't heard anything. I've heard that they really liked that location and it worked well. I didn't receive any complaints or any concerns about it being there.
I did attend the farmer's market a number of times last summer, and everything seemed pretty smooth, and it did not seem to be having a negative impact on the traffic flow in the area.
The grounds, the grass, and no garbage and stuff.
No. And they have received from all of the neighboring, up on the screen now, all of the neighboring businesses and entities around the courthouse. Everyone has already signed off on this for them. So,
any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Oh. Excellent. Item I, action to approve a request for funding from the Elkton Special Days Committee for $500 for their annual fireworks display for the 4th of July.
Move approval.
Second.
And does that come out of the commission PR budget then?
Yep,
Any discussion on that?
same as last year.
We've been giving that $500 amount for at least the five previous years. I didn't go back further than that to see, but we've been doing that for quite a while for them.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Item K, review and discussion of work plan topics. Are you going to lead that discussion, Stacy?
Yes. So this document in front of you, this is the first time you're seeing it with these topics, but this was something that was created before I was the commission department director, kind of in an interim time in between directors for the department, just so that the commission kind of felt like they were keeping on top of issues. So I went through it at one of the last meetings. We decided to take a look at this about a month ago to revisit this. So I sat down and, just kind of just brainstorm some ideas, some of the things that we have going on right now. So I guess I'm looking for direction from the board if this is something that you want to do. If it is, we can discuss what topics are on there. We can add, subtract. It's really just a working document, a very rough draft at this point. So I guess I'm just looking for board feedback on it.
Can anybody think of anything else that we should put on there?
I can't think of anything. Staff see anything that we're missing off the next year's work plan? Other than I see that we don't have finalized our ordinances, but that might be another thing. No.
I hope not.
Did we have on there set up a joint meeting with the small communities? Is that on here, Stacy, or is that on another document?
That's on the strategic plan, but we
Okay,
can add
sorry
it.
about
We
that.
can add that to this.
Okay.
At some point, I would like to have a discussion, but this wouldn't be a good thing to necessarily do right now. It's just when we're not crazy busy, which sometimes this year we've seemed like we had a lot of irons in the fire, but I mentioned this in passing at a prior report. The school district had a study done of their operation. And there's an entity, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it, that does this for city and county government and school districts and that sort of thing. And they come out and they look at your departments and they kind of look at what your staff's doing, and they look at your operation, and they come back and they make recommendations for improvements or things that people are doing other places that we might want to be looking at. I'd like us to consider at some point, but I don't know that we're there right now, some type of self-evaluation like that, and just to look at overall county operations. And I think that might fit in with our mission and goals reviews at some point. And maybe even look at the organization that did that project for the school. I think they might be going to be doing something for the city, but I'm not sure on that. There was some conversation about it. But if we could look at some options like that and maybe look at some self-evaluation and how do we know, if you don't know where you're going, how are you ever going to get there? Isn't that how that saying goes?
I guess I don't have a problem with that. I mean, you can always improve. You can always find ways to improve. If you don't look towards that, you're going to stand still. I guess what I would like to see then too, just off the top of my head, is if the school's going to do it, the city's going to do it,
And the school has done it already.
okay, and we do it, would then that group have the ability to look at services or something that we are duplicating, or could suggestions of different types of things that you could collaborate on that would have better efficiencies in government and not have to, especially when we get into the joint jurisdiction areas of zoning and stuff down the road, and expansion of cities and stuff, I think we're going to end up possibly you could go through 3 different boards and 2 different bodies to try to get something approved, which could be very daunting. And I think it would be helpful if we decided to do this, that we were with that group, and then we had a joint collaboration of saying, look, we're already doing this, you're already doing this, how can we work together on it? I think that'd be a beneficial part of it too.
I'm all for adequacies in the way we handle our government processes. However, I don't like studies very much, and I don't want to pay thousands of dollars to find out that we're doing a fine job.
Right.
So I would take that into consideration.
Have we looked at what the school received in feedback of theirs, or do they make that public?
I sat at a meeting where I just cannot remember the name of the entity that did the study, came in and they did a presentation. They also work with businesses and it was a large group of people where they shared what they'd done, and they talked about having done it. The Superintendent Willard, I think, might have brought, it was related to a BEDC matter, and he might have been the entity that brought them to the meeting, but they didn't talk about specifically what the recommendations were that the school did. So I don't know if those were made public or not.
I guess I wouldn't mind talking to, the school board and see if they felt it was worth the investment, if they brought back recommendations that were useful or not, and see if it was money well spent.
So we could put that on our work plan to consider looking into that, doing some research, and then just making a decision. We don't have to decide that we want to do it, but maybe explore doing it.
And that might be a good topic of discussion at the intergovernmental meeting that we have with that group that gets together quarterly, hosted by Mayor Corbett. The school district is represented there by usually Dr. Willert, and then Mr. Fishback is, your school board member is usually there. So I think that's a discussion that we could have, because there's also city representation there as well at that time.
And if you didn't mind, Stacy, if you reached out to Al Hooten, because he did put all of that together and brought all the materials that got handed out, he'd know the name of the organization, and he might actually still have some of their literature. What else is anyone thinking about on the work plan?
Just something to put in. You put me on the Humane Society's task force, and of course they have a wish list for probably more involvement from the county money-wise, so it's just something to throw. They want, they're trying to decide at this point to stay where they're at and add on and have a chance to buy that building, or to build, if someone would donate them land to build, so they got, I don't know if it's just to put it on your radar. I'm sure they're going to want more financial support from the county for the Humane Society. I don't know if that's just something for your radar.
And I guess, you talked about the meetings with the other cities and stuff too. I don't know if we need to put that on there or not, but I think we need to start considering, workforce development issues and trying to find housing issues. Our small communities are filling a lot of that void right now, but that's not always going to continue there too, and it's going to need to expand. And to expand that type of thing, you're going to have to expand cities, infrastructure, and the whole works. And I think it'd be good to have meetings with those individual municipalities and their leadership and see if they're looking towards the future in that stuff. And
Small town meetings.
yeah, well, and with their leadership, you know, with their mayors or their council members or whatever they have, and just ask, you know, and say, look, are you, you know, where are you guys at? What's your plan moving forward? Where are you going, and how does that affect the county? And can we work together in that to make it happen? Because, you know, if they're going to start expanding and trying to annex some land in and try to get utilities out to that area, it's going to involve us. And so I just, you know, because if we come to a standstill with available lots and building lots out in the county and the smaller towns, you know, it's really going to affect everybody in our county and all the employers and everything.
And I think the discussion initially on that was to wait until fall to have those meetings. Is it, do you want to move those up? I think October comes to mind when, you know, we had the initial discussion about conducting these meetings. We talked about both the small communities as well as the school districts, having, you know, a separate meeting with the school districts, one with the small communities and their leadership. But I think we're looking at that fall, September, October timeframe. If you feel like it needs to be sooner rather than later, we can sure look at trying to get something scheduled. But
I worry about you start trying to get stuff in the fall into the end of the year, and are we going to have time to get those meetings, and are they going to be available too? I know we talk about summer vacations, but we start talking about smaller communities, farmers harvesting and different stuff like that. You know, I don't know if we should wait, if we should start reaching out and say, you know, start the conversation with administrators from the other smaller cities and say, we'd like to get together, what works, and see if we can get going, I guess. I just think if we wait, you know, for a reason, if there's some time now, let's get together now.
I think earlier. Good idea.
I don't know. See if we can make it work, and if we can get the group together and start, you know, setting those meetings up and whittling away at them.
I thought maybe we could have, if we had one meeting, invited the small towns, they could each give a brief presentation of what's going on in their small community. If they had expansion plans, you know, what's going on. Or are you suggesting, Ryan, to meet with each one?
You know, I don't know. I think we're going to get more accomplished and more candid discussion when we're meeting with each one. Myself, separately. And, you know, and so.
Do you want the full board to do that?
I don't know. I think
or do you set up?
See, you know, we see
pull a couple commissioners to do that, because I think it's going to be, unless you're inviting them to come during a commission meeting to give a presentation, each of these small communities. Are you talking about a separate meeting that we have to notice and create an agenda for if the full commission is going to be there?
I was thinking separate meeting.
What do you want this to look like?
Right. Well, I don't know. I want the conversation to happen, I guess. I don't want to have too many people in the room and we look around and say, yeah, everything's going good. And it's like, okay, really? You know, I want to get to know where they're at and what they're doing, and how we can be involved in that and to help with the process if we need to.
Do we reach out to the small community and say a couple commissioners go to their town meeting and have them give us a briefing at their town meeting, at their council meeting?
I don't know. When Ray Sanema and that group was commissioners, the commissioners set a time and went into each. They did a separate commission meeting instead of meeting on your regular time. They scheduled a commission meeting in each little town, Elkton and Volga and so forth, and they had their commission meeting right there.
In that
something
town.
Something to throw out.
We're kind of tied to the electronics today.
I just threw that out.
Or do we just
yes,
have a?
we
or do
do
we just
rely
have
a lot
couple?
more on technology today, unless you held, you know, a special commission meeting at these locations. But I do recall when I was at the radio station going to the different towns, and they conducted their commission meetings at the small communities, and then typically the mayor or council members would be there to
I remember in
give an
Elkton, the
update.
school board superintendent was there.
Yep.
And
I like the idea myself of if there were a couple of commissioners willing to do it, to reach out and see if we could go to a city council meeting and have a conversation, just say we're checking in and want to know, what's going on in their community and what things that the county could be assisting with, and see if we have that conversation with their council.
That's what I was thinking too.
That's fine. Fine with me.
So why don't I reach out to all of those small communities or do some checking on when their upcoming meetings are in, May, June, July, and I will bring that back at the next, probably their June or July meetings, and bring that back to the commission, and maybe we can, or I could send that out, and then we can say, okay, one or two of you, which ones are available to attend this meeting and which two are available to attend this meeting, and so forth, and come up with a schedule for attending those meetings and try to get them all worked through, all the communities and school boards. Do you want to do school board meetings too? Do it that way with the school boards?
How about if we did the cities first and see how
it goes
before we decide?
Okay.
Yep.
I can do that and bring that. I could bring that back maybe at our May 15th meeting, so we can sit down and decide, who's available, and okay.
All right. Volga meets twice a month, so they have a noon meeting mid-month, and then the first Monday beginning of the month.
So as we look at our work plan, I kind of thought today we were making our list, but it seems to me like we're kind of walking down what we want to do on our items, and that's great. And I think number one, roads and bridges, are we kind of in agreement? We've got a handle on that, and Dick's on a calendar for getting our next 5-year plan done, and that is there something in addition to that we need to be doing on number one right now?
I don't know. I guess part of the future planning is, we just got a request from a township, and so is there a need out there for the township, for small structures on township roads to do that? And I guess, I don't know. It's only the first request we have, but would it be something to have a talk about? Maybe it's a budget discussion that we identify a certain amount of dollars that we would help with, in a budget for kind of a grant request type of thing. Just something I was thinking about. Last time we talked about what we've normally done and what we're going to do with that township, but if you look at their budget and what they're going to have to get done, could they apply? Last time we did a grant, what was the grant on again? We had pretty good response. We put out some money, and over the next year, township
Dust control.
I want to say
that was dust.
We did dust control,
And we also,
but that was for
For the
individual residents, though, could apply
Right.
if
That
it
was
was
for
on a detour
for
route, something along those lines.
but we did.
There was
township-
I want to say it was back in 2012 that we
Yes.
budgeted about 100,000. I think we
Yeah,
went
it
over a
was
little bit.
100,000.
We put $100,000 in the budget, and then the townships submitted applications for projects that they had going on. There were a lot of them that had, kind of haul road type issues, maintenance issues, and then each of those, we had a subcommittee, I believe, review those applications and bring a recommendation back to the full commission on which projects to approve and at what funding level to approve them.
And we awarded grants.
And then, yes, the county made payment to those townships
They would
to
handle,
spend that.
Yeah, they would handle it. We would reimburse or
just
some
gave
stuff
them-
too.
Yes.
So I don't know. I think it went well. It seemed like I thought it went fairly well, and I'm wondering if we shouldn't look at something like that for future planning of the small structures on township roads. Because we're responsible for the large structures on township roads, correct? So the small ones are what, the other township came in, Josh came in for too. So I guess, Dick, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but, if, this high water, all this type of stuff, if we continue to have that, they're going to deteriorate a lot quicker. And if townships are making decisions because they don't have the money, is there a way we can offer a grant to get that stuff done and get a replacement or upgrades of some of those small structures? Because, just driving around, just in the townships around Brookings, there was spots on almost every road that there was water coming over. And so I don't know if that's just, you got to build the road up, or if the culvert's not big enough, I guess I don't know. But I'd like to hear that, but I was wondering if we could maybe get that conversation started, budget some money for it. They would handle it. It wouldn't be necessarily a workload on you because you're going to be building bridges for the next 3 years. So it would be something that we could help with their township and maybe get a little more aggressive on fixing some of those problems.
One thing I think Commissioner Krogman would be very valuable with what you're stating is their needs are just like ours. They'll change as certain conditions might bring about a problem or an issue. And if you do it, like you say, allocating a certain amount of money and maybe looking at the needs on an annual basis would be probably a more objective and cleaner way of dealing with the townships. Because not only have we had Windsor Township and obviously now Madera Township, and they've been in before. Oak Lake contacted me yesterday, and by the way, they would like to have me share with you that they'd like to see you share more wind tower money with the townships. And, but that's what I mean. Those people are getting a hold of me, and right now, the only process we can really go to is bring you a pretty definitive need or request, and you act on it. But I think it would be a much better approach to make everybody feel like you're looking after the entire group of townships within Brookings County, that, hey, when you bring something, this is what we can do and this is the amount we have. Another example would be when we did those grants, every township that asked for a grant was strictly for gravel. There was no need for anything. And now with high water, again, high water is just like a leaky roof. Nobody cares about it till it rains. Now it's culverts, they're all concerned. So I think it's very viable, and we should certainly address it so that they understand we've got limitations too. I think it'd be important.
And we have to remember that, like Dick says, different times, previous winters have not been that tough, so a lot of these townships do have some money now. And before, when some of these grants were given, these townships did not have any money. They were basically operating month to month. But, like Dick said, make it fair to all of them, make sure they're all involved too. So,
Would something in it seems to me that we hear this request often, but what about something like saying the county has blank numbers of culverts that can be used that we would donate or give as a gift to townships for small structures, and to make some culverts available, and then they're responsible for the rest of it. But it seems to me that that's a big chunk of, and we're probably going to be having that conversation when we get to the Windsor Township anyway. But maybe we could make an offer to have some culverts available for some of those small structures.
How do you feel about that, Dick?
well, I mean, it's a share in the project. Either donate the culvert or you donate the money for hiring the contractor. I mean,
Donating the culvert's easy for us, as opposed to providing any labor.
The culverts, I mean, Dick would essentially order the culvert from here on, and they'd deliver it, and we'd pay for it. It's a dollar amount no matter what. I mean,
I don't want our highway department to have to do the project.
Right.
Okay.
No,
I want
exactly.
them to handle that. So, whether we donate the culvert or the $7,000 for the culvert, I guess, if there's a buying power thing that we can offer, you know, that we can get the culvert for 10% reduction because we've purchased them or something, or we're in a buying group that they're not, I could certainly see using that as a valuable asset. But I think that would just come off of that money, whatever. If it's a culvert that's worth this amount, that would be deducted from that money that we have, that pot of money there, I guess, if we decide to do that. So,
I guess.
I guess one thing too is, are the small structures that are on township roads, does Banner do a study on all those too, or just our structures?
Because they're under 20 feet,
Right.
they're not studied or inspected or anything because they're considered a culvert. So basically, it would be like the townships coming and requesting assistance because that opening of either a box or a culvert equals 16 square feet or more.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they want county help instead of just doing it themselves, then they have to come and negotiate as to what we would be willing to provide them, if anything. So that's what we're required to do. And so as far, like I mentioned on that one for Windsor Township, the water is right up to the bottom. It's no way I could evaluate by looking at the site that I concur with what they're proposing. Right. So that's why I said, well, let's just wait. But a lot of these others are a certain need, and I think some of them would be very difficult for a township to be able to finance a replacement for some of them. So I think you're, instead of like necessarily inspecting them on a regular basis, I think it would be more of a site-by-site evaluation of what would be a much better way for the county to either contribute or offer to help with that project. Does that help answer?
Right. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're getting the worst of the worst fixed first, I guess.
Oh, I see.
You
Yeah.
understand what I mean? So they're coming back and they're having issues. They can't get across. It's washing out. We're putting high water. They're closing the road all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's probably in there. But if one that just says, well, this one could fall on us sometime, but we don't know, and it could last them 20 years, you know, I would rather say, you know what, no, we're not going to help you on that one. If you want to replace it, go ahead and do it. But there's a lot of them here that need worse, and you know, kind of similar what the state does a little bit with the scorecard
Sure.
stuff, saying
Exactly.
this is the highest need we have in the state, and that's how we're going to do it. I don't want to get into that type of thing, but I would like somebody besides me to make that determination, because I'm not going to look at a culvert and say it's not going to last, because I don't have that. Either you, or if that's why I asked about banners, you know, could look at there and say, well, this ranks in this will last this time. This is our opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, if we based it off of your opinion of a site and your experience, I'd feel much better than that, than
Mm-hmm.
us saying yes to every off thing that came in, you know?
Right.
So,
Well, the only fault that I see there is that our highway superintendent is going out and he's got his hands full with our county issues, and then we send him out and to do all the to make decisions on all the township roads.
well, like I said,
When-
if he's out there and
Yeah.
I meet with them, they say, this is what we're looking at, and you give a, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
you can-
we've had 2 requests. I mean, that's 2 in the last couple, or 3 in the last couple of years. I mean, it's not all the townships are requesting it either. I mean,
Right. One thing that does happen is it's very difficult for the townships to sometimes swallow that there's not an easy answer to their problem. The one you were talking about in Madera Township, sure, you could raise the road, but that requires obtaining more right-of-way. It obtains environmental impacts. It you know, the darn getting permits from the Corps even become more involved when it's not an easy environment that you're working in. And so I think, Ryan, you're hitting on the right note that we need to address the worst first, but it's going to be a harder pill for them to swallow when they find out that there is no easy fix, so to speak. A very good example of that was, and it was on the list, was 213. You seen what they came up with from the hydrology study there to the expense that we'd go through to upgrade that 1.5 miles. Then they didn't even consider a bike trail because that would have added that much more because of the width and whatever. So it's not that it can't be done, and maybe it's realistic on our part to look at all aspects of every request, but there's some we might have to just say this is not an easy one.
The thing about doing some type of grant program, whether it's dollars or culverts or whatever, is that that would give the township some incentive where they might have this bad spot that you're talking about, and they just say, we're just going to leave it. But if there's some incentive there that they can apply for, that might get them to do something with those.
I just look at a lot of my decision-making on this too, and if I can have somebody share 50-50 with it or something like that, I might be willing to invest. If I'm getting matching dollars, it just seems like you're more willing to invest. And if that would spur some townships on, it's exactly what I was thinking, that there's a couple spots here, or a few of them that in their township that we'd really like to get taken care of, and now there's an opportunity to get a grant for it. Let's do it. And
so is how we would approach that, because that would be in our 2019 budget, is maybe to ask Stacy to kind of tuck this into the numbers for when we start doing our budget stuff. And I don't know if there's a dollar amount that we'd like to try to have for such a program, and then we would vote on it when we do budget to see if we got the money to do it.
I guess that's why I kind of brought it up now rather than just spur of the moment at the budget thing. I thought maybe this would be the time to discuss it. Not that we needed to air this thing out right now by any means, but I think the budget's probably the next place to have the discussion, and then the amount, we can all decide on that.
And I think I heard you say the last time it was $100,000.
You can see you can see in front of you on the screen. This was in 2013. We budgeted $100,000. We actually ended up spending a little over that, but this was
many projects.
So all of these vendors are different townships that applied. So
it worked well. I think
we had a
it
number
was
of
good, and they were appreciative.
We did 10 projects with it, and
So let's tentatively put that in our budget, and then we'll see if we've got money for it when we get to the budget. Would that be satisfactory with everybody?
it's good to me.
And then we'll readdress it at that time, see where we're at dollar-wise. Okay, anything else on roads and bridges to talk about today? We've kind of covered jail expansion, and the Joint Jurisdiction Committee continues to move along. On the Mental Health Task Force, I'd like to add a subcategory under there, just a little thing underneath it that says that Stepping Up program that we just passed the resolution on. So we're watching to be sure that we're doing what we say we're going to do. That number 5, I had the impression from the commission that there was no support for further discussion on the right-of-way issues on South Lake Drive. Is that correct? Do we need to have that on there? What's your position, Larry?
I guess just with right-of-ways in general within the whole county need to be, we just need to make sure that our right-of-ways aren't being encroached on and stuff being built or anything that would negatively affect our roadways. I mean, that's on every county road, but up here it was brought, the parking issue was just brought forward. That can happen anywhere within the county.
So are you saying this should come off, or are you saying that we should have a discussion regarding our right-of-ways and how we're enforcing our statutory ownership of our right-of-ways?
Well, I think Dick does that daily. I mean, you have, I mean, even run ads in the wintertime. You don't want snow piled within the right-of-ways. I mean, it's a kind of a daily task, in my opinion.
I don't think we need to have it on this.
No.
Okay, take that off?
Yeah.
Okay, BCOAC, and I do want to say, I went out yesterday and I looked at those game fish and park offices. Really nice. That just came out great. What, do we want any subcategories under BCOAC? I'm sure we'll be talking more about BCOAC as we go through the year.
Well, we're going to start budgeting here,
Mhm.
and so that's going to be our major thing, and how we fund budget. So, yeah,
Okay.
we're okay.
Beta?
You know, just to give an update on that is, you know, we've been trying to have, we had some conversations with the school on a joint facility, and there are, Beta has the ability to get some grant dollars for that facility, but there's a deadline. And what Pierre is saying is you need a site, and that's been the largest problem that we've had, is trying to find a site. And so we haven't really met recently. I know, you know, the school board had a lot of different other things, you know, on their agenda with the opt-out and different things like that. So I think it's definitely something we need to continue on a work plan to try to work there, because it concerns our highway, you know, department where it's at, concerns Beta, which we are an investor in. So I think it's definitely needs to stay on the work schedule, and it's slowed down for a little bit right now, but I don't think you need to take it off.
And then union negotiations just speak for itself. We'll just have to start getting ready for that. Commissioner Krogman had asked one time for additional information as relates to what's going on with our health insurance stuff. And that will tie into our union negotiations for next year too. And I think Stacy's setting up to have.
We're trying to get the gal that's putting some numbers together for us here on May 15th. We had made her aware of that date, but we're just confirming that date and time with her to come and present.
It would be interesting when we have that conversation to have the numbers on what our health insurance costs us overall. And I know it's just a budget thing to look at, but if there are other things statistically from the numbers that they keep track of, I'd like to hear that. Then number 9, every time I bring up 213, y'all say we'll talk about that at budget time. Are we going to have a conversation at budget time, or does that stay on our work plan, or where are we at?
It's a matter of how much can we bite off. I mean, I think we need to get our jail built before we worry about 213.
I guess discussion on the bike trail, I mean, I'd love to see it happen. Where, it might change, but I know with the bike trail committee, I think that's part of their overall plan is connect to Aurora. But
I'd like to see this stay on our work plan, and then we talk about it more, and maybe we can look at it again when we get to the budget stuff. And then I-29 overpass is a dream, obviously, that we're working on. I do think that there will be a request forthcoming sometime in the next few months for us to make a contribution to that study that we had said that we would consider when the time came. I think we're getting to a point where we'll get a request for some money for that, but we don't have to decide that today. Is there anything else on the work plan that we need to talk about today? Okay, then I think we'll move on to the Commission Department Director's Report.
The first thing that I have is kind of an update on pictometry. Since I sent out, since the agenda was created, I have visited with Brookings City Manager Jeff Weldon, and then as well as some representatives from BMU. Basically, all 4 entities now have indicated, I guess I'm waiting now from the commission to indicate that you are interested in, again, doing this, but I think that's kind of a foregone conclusion, I guess, because we oversee this. But one change, though, is from what was presented in my report, was that BMU came, they looked at what we were, doing the more detailed pictures of that area, and that's always presented on the last page of those proposals. What BMU is, what they requested was to include their wellheads in that area. And so in order to do that, and everybody's looking at the second option, that 38,000, that it gives us that better imagery. That's what I know E911 board gave consensus. They didn't approve the agreement, but they gave consensus at that. BMU has indicated that that's what they would like to, as well as Mr. Weldon with the city. So, but then adding what they call these sectors, basically for BMU to include those their wellheads to get those better images. We went back to Ryan Poots, our gentleman at Pictometry, and he came back with two other options to add in. I think it's like 5 sections or sectors. It was going to jump up from that $38,070 to $38,870. So it added about $800. But what he said was to get to 50 sectors, which would reduce the price per sector, if you're following me. If we wanted to add, instead of just the 5, we added, I believe, an additional 6 more sectors. The cost actually goes down to add more because then we would hit 50 sectors and the price per sector goes down. So really where we're at is $38,725.
If I could make one comment, we've also got wellheads in Volga that could probably use your imagery reaching out just a little bit more.
And what Jeff Weldon and I discussed in thinking of, I think it's like 6 more sectors to add that would benefit all 4 entities who are involved with, who buy into this agreement, is to add some additional areas in the joint jurisdictional area.
I don't know, though, I think it's a good idea to have that enhanced wellhead information. It affects a lot of different entities. I know that Weed was looking at that with, because we had requests to spray Tordon, and we can't go anywhere near our wellhead areas with that chemical. And so our GIS people were doing maps for Misty, and they're not, we need up to date. So it affects a lot more areas than a person would think. So I think it'd be a good idea to, at this point, what's $800 more?
Yeah. And that would be split, that cost, that $38,725 would be split between or among 4 different entities paying for that. That's an annual cost. It's actually $116,174 over the 3 years. So this is a flight for that would last 3 years, and then we do it again and revisit this again in 3 years. But if get consensus from you, we'll work on which sectors besides the wellheads on what to add to that to get us up to that 50, since we can add some more in. If I get consensus from that, I will work with Jim Sampson, our GIS technician, and get the agreements drawn up. Basically what he and I were looking for was just kind of consensus from the 4 entities so that we can move forward and get the official agreements drafted. So if that is the case, we'll move forward in that direction. The BCOAC Advisory Board at their last meeting gave approval to allow our part-time maintenance worker out at that facility to work up to 19 hours per week. The job description was written as 10 hours per week. He's finding that there's more to do out there and is willing to work up to 19. That would still, that individual would still be considered part-time and not be, it still would not be a benefit eligible position. So I'm just kind of looking for consensus from this board to see if that's okay to increase the number of hours for that position.
Does he work? He doesn't work for us anywhere else. This part-time person. This is the only.
This is a separate position. Yes.
I don't have a problem with increasing it because I think there probably is enough. I mean, that's a large area to work on, but I don't think that he should be sitting at the front desk, and I did see that. So, I mean, he's there to do maintenance.
And the more and more events we have out there, I mean, they use a room, you get people coming in, especially with the parking lot the way it is. There's mud, the floors, stuff need to be cleaned after each event in the hallway, and just continual maintenance out there.
When I was out there yesterday, he was polishing the floors in the archery range.
Really?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we'll go in that direction. We did receive the 2 grant notices of award for our big projects, which we are well aware of that we did receive, and those amounts there are the $1,042,900 and then the other for $811,800. Before I get into the handout for the highway, I'll just go over some dates with you because I think that might be a bigger discussion. So today, I think it's at 2 o'clock. Did I have that on your? I didn't have it on there. I can verify. I think that's at 2 o'clock. There's a groundbreaking for the Prairie Aquatech facility in Volga today. I'll double check on that.
That is at 2 o'clock.
Is it at 2 o'clock? Okay. Yep. I think I just saw it, but I didn't have a time verified. So 2 o'clock this afternoon. May 10th, CVB Annual Tourism Luncheon out at Swiftel Center. May 14th, the Project Search Graduation you were invited to. That's at 7 o'clock at SDSU. On the 24th, the Mayor's Appreciation Reception. If you want me to RSVP for you, we have to RSVP by May 10th. I don't know if maybe some of you have done that already, but if you'd like me to RSVP for you, please let me know. Otherwise, feel free to reach out. I think you might have all been contacted, maybe received an individual invitation to that. Tomorrow, there's a Conservation District meeting. That agenda I passed out this morning. That's tomorrow at 8:15 a.m., a little bit different time. Usually I think it's in the afternoon, just to note that. And then also I handed out this morning, we received an invitation to the grand opening of the Trojan Horse-Drawn Museum in Volga. That's going to be on Sunday, May 27th. That's Memorial Weekend. They're just doing a grand opening. It's going to be open from 1 to 5. It didn't say anything about a specific presentation or anything, but they invited you over there on that day from 1 to 5 to be part of that grand opening. And then a little bit further out, June 11th, there's a Prairie Nightingale Spring Social at the hospital at 6 o'clock. That's all I have for upcoming dates. The other handout that I had this morning was Dick had mentioned it as part of his staff report that we had a highway meeting with Dick and Linda and Vicki and Jen in the finance office. Commissioner Miller was there, myself, to go over some of this information and to hopefully, kind of make sure that we were all on the same page, but also to get some information to maybe clarify some things for the board. So I'll just go through this, and if you have any questions, let me know. So right now we do have an expense line in the general ledger. It's written out there in the Road and Bridge Fund 201-4311-4221. It's called Big Matching Grant. That's going to be used to budget for counties matching funds for big projects. That line was created in 2017. It had a zero budget that year. We didn't have anything budgeted in that line, but we did spend just over $86,000. $35,800 of that was county matching dollars for big projects. I think we had maybe some preliminary engineering, I think for the most part was what that was. And just to know, when a project costs more than the amount of the grant, the county is responsible for 100% of those overage costs. So then the remaining $50,300 of that $86,000 that was spent last year out of that line was overage for a grant for that particular bridge listed. We decided moving forward that we would not be taking any of the overage amounts out of this GL line. We wanted this GL line to just accurately reflect county match dollars for big grants. So this year, that line has $705,773 budgeted in it. We haven't spent any of that yet this year. What we discussed was that budget is made up of about 200, just shy of 216,000, was 20% match for that first river bridge that we were awarded the big grant for last year. 71,000 was the 20% match for the preservation grants for those bridges. Also, those were grants that we received, big grants received last year. And then this is a kind of an estimated amount, but when we were dealing with this, if you think back to June last year, what we had for an estimate and then a 20% match, because we didn't know, we hadn't made a decision on what we were doing for match dollars at that point. So about 419,000 of that is for that second river bridge. And then we were anticipating, I think, getting that grant. Now that's only about 27 or 20% match for a dollar amount that was right around that 1.9, I want to say, or 1.9, yeah. So, a couple of questions for the commission. If you'd like to see a separate GL line that the county would pay overage expenses out, and again, we could track that separately, but we're all going to keep moving along. But again, just that reminder that we're given a grant amount, and we match that. And once those dollars are used up, if for any reason that project goes over that grant amount, 100% of the cost is the county's. So, as was noted in last year, about a little over 50,000 was spent as an overage amount for grants that just didn't. There were just added costs onto the end of the project that we weren't aware of going into it, whether it's change orders, whether it's issues due to weather. There's a number of factors. Also, another amount that you would maybe like to take a look at and have separated out is the amount that the county spends on getting a bridge shovel ready. We spent approximately $140,000 on that second river bridge, the one that we were awarded this year on South Highway 77, prior to even submitting it for the grant application. We did that to get it shovel ready so we could have that better chance of getting that grant, which we did. So we could combine those two things, overage amounts, 100% that the county pays over and above a grant, and the county's 100% that we pay to get a bridge shovel ready. And we could put that, maybe create one GL line to track those costs, and we could, we'd be able to itemize those and separate those out too. So I guess I'm kind of looking for direction from the board, and we can finish this up and we can come back to that. So some things to note. So the state's portion of big dollars allocated for any project, it's administered by the state. So what happens is the state pays 100% of the cost of all big projects. And then bills each county for their percentage of commitment. So we've committed 50% for the one bridge, the two bridges on it that were awarded this year. The state doesn't cut us a check for their 50% match. Their match money does not come to the county. It's never on our books. What we end up doing is reimbursing the city for 50% of each invoice that's submitted. So again, if the project then goes over the grant dollars, we're on the hook for 100% of those additional costs. So I think what we were talking about, as far as what's in fund balance, and there was a concern that, that there's maybe some money in that fund balance that we've already budgeted for match dollars. There isn't. Prior to this year, we have 705 in there, but there's not in any previous years have there been money budgeted that rolled into that fund balance. So there's match money in there, that line. So if there is match money now in that line where we're keeping it and it goes unspent, because projects will probably maybe the project itself won't span a couple of years, but the billing might span a couple of years, or however that's going to look. If there's money left in that 4221 line, that's going to be specific match dollars. We'll do a supplemental budget in the beginning of the next fiscal year to take that money out of fund balance and move it back into this 4221 line so we can continue to spend those match dollars. Then the other situation then is if it rolls into fund balance and the project is done. Do you want to, if you want, what we can do is then assign those dollars out of the fund balance, create a separate assignment line saying these are match dollars that went unspent, okay? Then they're there and they're separated out. You can see them. They're not assigned to any one project at that point because the project is over. But then you know that we've had these in the past, and then we can do a supplemental budget and use those dollars for subsequent big match payments too. But it just kind of separates those out a little bit. Linda has been tracking expenses by bridge number on separate spreadsheets, and she showed those to us that day. And we can get those to you too if you'd like to see it. But she's going to continue to do that, for future projects as well. So I mean, for every bridge project that she does, she tracks everything by that bridge number and tracks what's going on with it and all of the expenses. And so on the second page, though, so for 2019, for budgeting, the commission is going to, along with Dick's help too in that budgeting process, you're going to decide how much of that fund balance you're going to want to use in 2019, and you're going to have to use some of it for these big projects, for these matching. I think that was the intent of the board, is to use some of those fund balance dollars. I also would think it would be a good idea for the board to come up with an amount that you feel comfortable leaving in fund balance, or a percentage, in case an emergency arises. Now, the 201 fund is different than the general fund in that we don't have that 40% max surplus, general fund surplus that we report. There isn't anything that we have to abide by in that sense. So it's different from general fund. So that's a discussion that the board needs to have too. You don't want to spend down your fund balance to nothing and then all of a sudden you have a bridge go out somewhere and now you're going to need dollars and you don't have them available. So I think there's still a happy medium to be found there where you could obviously spend some of that down because there is money there, but to what level do you want to leave some fund balance in place? So then I just, at the end, just the fund balance totals. In the 201 fund, about 4.8 million. In the general fund, you have about 4.75 million in that future economic development highway projects line, and 614,101 assigned in general fund for highway projects, for just over $10 million in fund balance right now that you have designated as money for roads and bridges. Now, the money in the 101 fund, you can do whatever you want with. That's not, I mean, you have dedicated that as a board to highway. That's not saying you have to. At this point, it's still in the general fund and you can use that for whatever project you want to use it for. But that 4.8 in the 201 fund must be spent on roads and bridges. Any questions? Lots of questions?
So I would like us to see in our 201 fund category that says big grant matching monies. Okay.
We have that.
But that's in the 201 fund?
Yes. It is. That's the very first sentence is we have that 201 fund titled Big Matching Grant where we can budget for dollars.
Okay, that's in our general ledger, okay? But is that a fund balance account then? No,
No.
it is not. No. No. No, what that,
No.
let me say this and then you can tell me if I've got it wrong, okay? Because this is so confusing. What you're talking about on that 705,000 that we've got budgeted into 4221, right?
Yes.
That's our general ledger, this year's expenses, and that will come out of this year's money, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's entirely different than our fund balance.
Yes.
Okay. And we don't have matching, an account for matching monies that are in our fund balance where we would, for example, when you look at our overall general fund, we've got, the jail, and we've got buildings, and we've got other kinds of categories. What I'm saying is we should have a category like that, I think. So if we know we're going to dedicate some of our 201 fund balance to matching money, if we're setting it aside for that, that we put it there. Mm-hmm.
I guess I was thinking that it's going to depend on what we want, how we want to fund our matching dollars. If we fund it with a fund balance, then I think we should keep, like you're talking about,
right?
A line in that fund balance showing that this was pulled out of fund balance and
Yes.
it's identified
And
for big grants.
And we plan on doing that moving forward.
Right.
The board has taken no action to date to assign anything for matching.
I think we gotta
Nor
wait for
has
that.
there been any money rolled into fund balance that was specifically budgeted for matching. Up until now, this year, there is. So we will
Potential
track
for that.
There is potential
For
there.
that 419,000 to be rolled into a fund balance in the 201, and then we can continue to add dollars. if
Yes,
we decide
and
we
you
want to.
can assign dollars out of fund balance
Right.
for matching. You can do that with either, taking those monies out of the general fund that you have assigned and assign them in the building fund. Once you do that, you are saying these are going to be spent on roads and bridges.
Right.
And I would have to look at whether or not they can take some of the fund balance, that 4.8, and reassign it. How is it
Should
noted?
be able to, shouldn't we?
Inside the
We
fund.
can, within the fund.
Within the fund,
Yeah.
assign it,
Yeah.
reassign it. And so that is possible, and I think that's what Commissioner Pierce is talking about, is
Exactly.
using some of that 4.8 and assigning it. Now, if I don't know if you wanted, you can do that you can basically do that any time. But what I'm saying is part of the budgeting process, we will have to do that at budget time, is decide what of that 4.8 or the 10.1, quite honestly, but specifically the 4.8, because that is assigned for roads and bridges, that has to be spent first.
So what happened is Stacy gave me this very nice tutorial about 2 weeks ago on this, okay? And I did not understand, and maybe everybody else has this in mind, so that 705,000 will never come out of our assigned fund balance or our future economic or any of that. That's all coming out of this year's money, okay? So we really need in our fund balance, when we do our budget, we have to say, okay, we know we're going to spend, is it $2.5 million? I'm trying to remember where we're at on our numbers. We went over those. Dick gave us all those numbers last time for the two big bridges and the Sinai Bridge. So how much of that will we be able to take out of next year's income? And that part won't ever show up in the fund balance then. And how much of this 10 million do we need to set aside for those matching monies? Then we'll know what other projects we can discuss, because we'll have the rest of our fund balance to look at that if we want. Did that make sense?
Yep.
So we just need that additional line in there. So that
we
can
need
do
to
that.
assign dollars. If you want to assign other than what's going to roll into fund balance at the end of 2018, if you want to assign additional dollars for big matching grants. But I would caution, though, because that 4.8 is assigned within 201. So, I mean, if you move money over from the general fund, that money actually that's already in 201, 4.8, has to be spent first. And Vicki, correct me if I'm wrong on this.
But we would want that matching fund money to be in the 201 fund and then to use some of that 4.8 for that. That's where we'd want that money to come from, that we just move it from the.
You'd have to use, yes,
Yeah,
you'd have to
and
use
move
that first.
into
Yeah.
matching, yeah.
Yeah, you have to spend that money. If you move any of the general fund dollars over,
Yeah.
those
We wanna
really
do that.
aren't as restricted as what the 4.8 is. The 4.8 has been money specifically budgeted or income from wheel tax or, things that are specific for roads and bridges that you had to. Moving money over from the general fund, it's obviously once it's there, you're spending it on roads and bridges, but you're going to want to spend those restricted dollars that have been coming in specific to roads and bridges and budgeted in past years first.
But what we need to be able to do when we look is we need to be able to see, okay, of that 4.8 million, we've got 2 million committed to the matching monies. So we've got 2.8 million of the saved monies for roads and bridges where we can look at another project if we want. And we can't tell that the way we've got it set up now.
Yeah, I guess one of my question is a little bit on this cash flow. On the 2018 budget, so we budgeted 705,000, and we didn't fund that. That was funded on mill levy and taxes.
Yes.
That was in the budget and that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So we didn't pull it from any fund balance or anything. Okay, so the first river bridge probably won't be done. For sure, the Sinai Bridge won't be done. So at the end of this year, when we get done with 2018, none of this money had been spent. So
Except for maybe about, I don't know, the preservation grants.
Okay, yeah, maybe the
Those will
71,000.
get spent this year.
Maybe the
Yeah, that matching. About 71,000 maybe will get spent this year.
So where does this money stay in the 201 fund?
Yes.
Okay, is it in the 4.8 million or?
Not right now, it is not. It is
So
not included in the 4.8.
What's our balance then in the 201 account that's not assigned, unassigned? Where does it show up? Because this money, it could be 2 years, it looks like, before we spend this $419,000. Where does it go until then, and how do I know that we're going to have to pay this in 2 years?
And that's so we can do one of two things. At the end of the year, if it goes unspent, it's going to roll into that fund balance, the 4.8. So that's what I said.
That's what my point is.
Yes,
is that goes
and that's
into
what I said, where the board would have to do a supplemental budget hearing, move that money back into 4221 so we can spend it again. So
Great.
we can spend it in 2019.
That's what I want to see happen, because then we know we've got it pulled out
Yes.
there. But
or you could also assign it if you don't want it, if you don't need it to spend. Say you're all caught up, all your matching dollars have been spent, we're waiting on the next project to show up. You can assign whatever is left, say 100,000 is left in there, it goes unspent. You can assign it as, matching money, unspent big money as an assignment under 201, and then you can see it. It's not part of the 4.8, it's pulled out, and you can see that, okay, at one point we had $100,000 of big matching money. We didn't need to spend it because the project came in way under cost.
Right.
Now we have that there.
I'm not concerned about the overages, because that tends not to happen very often. It's usually the opposite. We're going to end up having to pay more. But what I am concerned about is how much have we of the 4.8 million? How much have we already?
None. No.
It's not committed to anything.
There's
It
no
is not-
money in the. There's no. No bills, no projects that haven't been done, no projects that we budgeted for in 2017 that won't get paid out in 2018.
At one time, we put some of that in there because we were thinking we might fund that bridge on our own. That's when we added to that.
Okay, and that's what that was my question. So if we're going to decide how much we want to take out of 4.8, I want to know how much we haven't paid bills yet.
None.
We're okay.
None.
So like when we do the chip sealing, when we do the overlays and all that stuff, all gets paid for by the end of the year.
Yes.
Okay.
But did I hear you say, Stacy, so we get to the end of the year, and let's say that, the 4221 fund has, of that 705,000, let's say we've got 500,000 left, we can put that into the 2019 budget instead of rolling it over into fund balance? We have that
Yes,
option?
it would initially roll into fund balance, but then what you would do at one of the very first meetings in the new fiscal year, so if it's not the very first meeting in January, surely by the second meeting, well, we'd have to, it's noticed, it's a public hearing, you do a supplemental budget hearing, and you say, you know, we're going to move these monies, you know, for expenses that we know are coming, that weren't able to pay in 2018. Now we're going to move this, and we're going to move it into the 4221, and it's going to show up as, it's giving it more budget authority, basically, if we wanted the technical term. It's going to give us budget authority in that 4221 line for another $500,000, plus whatever else if the board budgets for additional dollars. So it would be in addition to what's budgeted in there for 2019.
So put simply, at the end of the year, the excess rolls into fund balance, and then at our first meeting, we put it back into
If we
the
need
place
it.
we
If you
want
need
it,
it,
if we
wherever
need
you
it.
want it.
To balance the budget. Mhm.
Yep, wherever you want it, we can do that.
So I just want to say this, you know, when we talk about 213, and I just want to throw this out for all of you to keep in mind when we're doing budget stuff. So we have $10,174,000 right now that is in fund balance that will not be used for any of our current year expenses for roads and bridges. Now, we might need $2.5 million of that if we have to come up with all of our matching money for roads and bridges next year, okay? But that still leaves us with over $7 million where we could do 213 if we chose to do that. We don't have to have that conversation, but when we're saying we don't have the funds to do it, we do have the funds to do it. It's just whether we want to do it. So I'll throw that out. That was helpful. Any other questions? Did you have anything else for your
I don't have
report?
anything else unless you had some, but does it all kind of make sense? Is that helpful?
No, I just, like I said, the cash flow portion of it, we have something that goes unspent. I just want to know that it's assigned for something.
Yes.
It's somewhere where we know that
And-
that fund balance is not necessarily 2.8, it's 2.4 because there's 400,000 that went unspent because the
Yeah.
project
And
wasn't done yet.
We're going to be looking at that at year end and pulling those dollars out and having that discussion with the board at that time. Okay, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to do a supplemental budget hearing, put it back in the budget for the subsequent year so you can spend it? And that's basically, if a project isn't finished, that would be my recommendation. If you still have bills that are coming in for a particular project, you want to move those match dollars that went unspent in 2018, for example, into 19, but it's probably going to be more like 2019 into 2020. But
Does it?
and then if you're done, if the project is done, you have no more bills, then you can assign it
Right. That's
within
what
the fund balance.
Yep.
So and pull that out.
Does it have to go at the year end into fund balance? Do you have to zero out the accounts? They all have to go into fund balance,
Everything has to roll into fund balance initially. Yeah.
no matter what? All right.
Why do you feel that is a problem?
It isn't. If you left it in the general account, knowing that bills were coming in a couple months, it was already budgeted for. We just leave it in the general account, and they pay the bill in February. And it's money budgeted. It doesn't go into our next year's budget, because what I don't want to see happen is us raise funds twice for the same project. You understand what I mean? That because it didn't get done and get paid, and so then it goes into fund balance, and it sits there, and then we tax to do that, to pay. So it almost gets twice, is what I don't want to see happen. I want that fund balance to come back and pay for that project.
And that's what we do.
Okay.
And that's what we'll do. It's going to take some looking into the crystal ball, so to speak, because our budget needs to be done early, and we may not know exactly what will be or won't be left in that particular line at year end. I mean, it's going to have to take some, kind of looking at where the project is and what in bills we anticipate coming in before year end. But
which is why we have to keep a certain amount in that fund balance.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you want to say something?
I was just going to say too, if we don't plan on spending it in 19, if some of those are going to go over to 20, then we can still keep it in fund balance, but have it assigned, have a specific line that it is for matching or whatever. But we can keep it in the fund balance, but we'll just have it noted in the fund balance that it's for this if we don't need a supplemental budget hearing.
State's Attorney's report. Okay. Commissioner reports. Mr. Jensen.
Believe on the 18th, we did a walkthrough at the OAC with our insurance provider, Lynn Bren. Looked at our archery range out there. It was a short meeting. We're going to talk through some things on our walls out there. On, I think there was the 20th, Londa Hexum called. I've talked about that with Bob already. She contacted Bob, and they're working on the Madera Township drainage out there. On the 23rd, we had a BCOAC meeting, continue work on the budget. The GF&P rooms are done. Also, Train is having some issues out there with the heating and cooling. I think there's continue to work on that. Ryan might touch on that a little bit more. The parking lot was discussed. It's still a disaster. I think we need to look at somehow remedying the situation out there because it is a maintenance issue in the building and the people coming and going. It's kind of a mess. So on the 24th, believe it or not, we had some water issues all over. Had a few calls about our new road out there on 34th Avenue. I talked with banners out there, met with them. There was an area out there that was underwater for a considerable amount of time, and I just basically said it's not a good deal. It's a new road. I guess I'd like to see either banners and our highway superintendent and the contractor come up with a solution to try to remedy the situation out there. It did have it signed, slowing traffic down. They were proceeding through the water. There was loaded trucks proceeding through the water. So it's something we need to look at. I did have some calls on weight limits when it was coming off. Dick answered that this morning, and I guess by the end of the week, the weight limits are coming off. Yep. So that's all I had.
On April 18th, we had an extension board meeting, and primarily we worked on the budget. That afternoon, I had a weed board meeting, and they're gearing up for the season, and we talked about chemicals. Misty had a conversation with the state because we had several requests from townships wanting us to spray Tordon, and they advised absolutely not. Our aquifer is too close to the surface, and we have too many wellheads. On April 20th, I attended the meeting that we've already pretty well hashed through regarding the budget and highway and the big grants. And that's it.
Sorry. The 18th, we did the walkthrough with Robbins Construction and GF&P, and it went well. They seem really happy. We just had to get some locks changed out to make sure they're correct and all that good stuff. And then I attended the United Way Mixer on the 19th. Also, we had the BCOAC Advisory Board meeting on the 23rd. Again, getting ready for budgeting and just going over just day-to-day operations of the BCOAC. Yesterday, I also met with Banner on 34th of the water going over. They assured me that they were going to look into it and try to come up with a solution. So they'll be getting in touch with you, Dick, and Sure, and they'll be taking a look at everything on that there. So, and then also had a Brookings Health meeting last night. There'll be Lynn Darnell will be a new board member starting actually today. So she was there. That was a city appointee, and the city is going through the changing of their ordinances on how the board members are picked. I would say, Steve, have you involved in that a little bit too? Yeah, and so that does affect us. It's not in front of us because it's the city's deal, and so, but we do have to follow it, and so it's just some clarifications of stuff. Doesn't really affect, doesn't change the fact that we still have appointees to our board in that process. It's just the fact of the communications and different stuff and notifications of it when it's happening. I think Stacy's been involved with it too, so that will be done at the city council meeting. I'm thinking today, it sounds like. But otherwise, everything's going well there at Brookings Health, and yeah, that's about it.
On April 19th, I attended the United Way Mixer, went to the joint jurisdiction meeting on April 25th. We had a lot of conversation about utilities and housing development at that meeting, which was very interesting. And then on April 26th, I attended the Brookings County Housing meeting, and I think I reported back to you earlier this spring. In 1991, Brookings County passed an ordinance adopting or establishing the Brookings Housing Redevelopment Commission. Then in 1993, Brookings County turned all the Section 8 housing over to the city of Brookings by ordinance. In 2001, this piece I didn't know the last time we talked. In 2001, the city of Brookings disbanded their housing commission, said that it was not properly formed, and turned everything back to the county. We cannot find anything in the county that says we readopted or amended our ordinance, and so now that's the next step. We're going to work on an ordinance that gets us in compliance with state law, so that if there's an issue with the Section 8 housing, we've got our ducks in a row. So that's what we're working on in that regard now. On April 28th, I went to the airport fly-in and looked at the Civil Air Patrol stuff and our materials and everything. There were a huge number of people out there. It was a really good turnout. So that was good. And I did have a question for Commissioner Krogman or Commissioner Jensen. When will Game Fish and Parks be moving into the BCOAC?
It's dependent on when their furniture comes.
Okay.
They are actually paying rent right now.
Oh.
They agreed to prorate.
Yeah, 8 days of April, we prorated for them, and then they'll make the full payments starting May 1st, but they were prorating since April.
I think the day after we walked through.
Yeah, it was
that
Monday after the walkthrough, so it was April 23rd, I believe.
Right.
Last Monday, they officially could have moved in.
Yep, they agreed to start. He said, "You guys got it ready. It's ready to move in. You're good to go. We'll start paying rent." And so they're going. So again, the only thing we don't have yet is that agreement for the space, and they're working on that. He's kind of caught up in his peer offices to get that down to us, and so that's still on the way. But they have started, so they can move in anytime. We've got keys for them. We've also when they get started, they'll have their own passes to get into their door, and obviously to the front door. And so, yep, they're there.
It really did look good. I would entertain a motion to move into an executive session in accordance with SDCL 1-25-2 subpart 1 personnel actions.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.